Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Mom didn't cry, didn't get hysterical or numb, didn't start cursing men or touchingly pitying her daughter. In general, she behaved in her usual manner. Sitting down, across the table, she reached across the table and stroked Cindy's palm. It was for the best that Cindy saw his true face now and not later. The kind of guy that would leave sooner or later anyway, even at the worst moments in life. If it wasn't for Nancy, it would have been for someone else. Be glad you won't have to regret the lost time and effort. Let's make your favorite lemon cookies for ourselves. Mom, are you kidding me? What cookies? I can't breathe. Cindy sobbed, and Mommy just let her sob, looking on with understanding and involvement. Patiently waiting for the tears to stop, she brought a glass of water and said, putting her arm around her shoulders, "It actually helps a lot in these cases to do something familiar and ordinary. Except for nasty chores like cleaning and washing dishes, of course. My mom hated both, although she loved to cook and could create a culinary miracle from the simplest and cheapest products. I hate doing the dishes and making things clean." Without any caprice, sincerely informed her fans, and frightened fans of free coziness quickly dissolved in space. Cindy didn't work out like Mom. She doesn't know how to stand up for herself. So they take everything away from her. So Robert was taken away. That's what she should do. 6 months ago, Cindy had a happy accident. She was in the right place at the right time, and her humble life changed miraculously. She had just graduated from teacher's college and came to work in a kindergarten. Many old acquaintances were surprised by Cindy's unfashionable choices. At school, she studied well, without much effort, and could have chosen a more prestigious and profitable specialty. Only Nancy's mother, grandmother, and friend were not surprised. They were aware that Cindy loved babies, and babies adored her since Cindy had managed to grow out of baby age herself. It was so, and the calling was pointless to resist. Of course, she will not stop at college, will combine profile studies with work. Cindy was given a junior group of 15 3-year-olds, 10 of them boys, and half of them hyperactive. There's no need to be bored. The whole shift is a roller coaster. Her magical ability to calm children will definitely come in handy here. The 5 little girls in this group are amusingly different. 2 little girls, 2 princesses, and a shy, brooding Jenna. On a walk, some slide off the roof of the children's slide like monkeys, others twirl prominently in pretty dresses, and Jenna gazes at flowers, bugs, and butterflies, trying to remain almost invisible herself. This girl was neither stuffy nor intimidated. She was just cozy enough to ponder alone. After watching her teacher for a couple of days, Jenna decided that she could trust her, and when she felt it necessary, she showed her findings or was the first to bring her drawings. She really loved to draw. Cindy couldn't help herself. Jenna was the one she was most attached to and loved. It was usually Mama who came to get Jenna. She was a small, graceful blonde, a little older than her teacher, gentle, polite, not very talkative. She seemed like an enlarged copy of her little daughter. She raised the child alone. She often looked sad and tired, according to the headmistress. The 3 of them lived together, Jenna, her mother, and her grandmother. But the grandmother had not yet been seen in the kindergarten. The gossip at the daycare center was that she had been against the birth of Cindy's favorite, had persuaded her daughter to have an abortion, and was now fundamentally unhelpful in raising the baby girl. Cindy has become even more infiltrated with the girl. She herself grew up without a father, but in the love and care of her mother and grandmother, never once all her childhood did not doubt. Cindy could have grown up mistrustful and wary, but was prevented by her mother's easygoing nature. Mom was convinced that most people weren't bad. It's just that everyone is very different. Hence the misunderstandings between them. It was Cindy's third month at the daycare center, when instead of Mama Clara came to pick up Jenna, a sturdy, charming brown-haired man of about 25, energetic hand, with gray-blue eyes and a bright, self-assured smile. It seemed to Cindy that he realized he had made an impression on the young educator, and it was even hurtful. Had Jenna's father remembered her? She thought, and in an instant she understood Jenna, Mom, and out loud she said, "I can't give my child to a stranger. It's for the safety of the children entrusted to us." Jenna's mom had no warning that someone else was coming for her. No question about it. Her stranger replied magnanimously, pulled out his cell phone, made a call, and said into the receiver, "Clara, here's the most beautiful Mary Poppins. To me Jenna does not give. Talk to her in your own voice, that I am not a stranger." And I gave the phone to Cindy. Jenna's mom voice came through. "Excuse me, I forgot to warn you yesterday. My brother arrived and asked Jenna to pick him up so I wouldn't have to run like a fugitive from work." Cindy knew that Clara, the accountant, had a strict boss who would rather stay late at work than leave early. Sometimes all the children are already taken away, and Cindy and Jenna are still walking alone on the playground, waiting for their mom. It's good that Clara will have a little rest, and Jenna will not be offended that she is the last to be picked up. And for some reason, it is very unpleasant that the young man is not Jenna's dad. Though that doesn't mean he doesn't have children of his own. And anyway, why should she be interested in that? "Thanks for your vigilance, Cindy," declared the guy with mocking seriousness. "You can be trusted. Come and see Uncle Jenna. Let's go home." At the exit, he turned around with the girl in his arms. "And my name is Uncle Charles. Goodbye, Uncle Charles." With a reserved smile, Cindy said goodbye and forced herself to immediately turn around and walk from the locker room to the group. Don't let him think he impressed her. She sees uncles like that every day. It's so commonplace, and it's a Hollywood smile, like an ad man or a salesman. Anyway, it didn't work out for Cindy. She kept thinking about Jenna's uncle all evening. And tomorrow he came for his niece again. The usually cautious, reserved Jenna ran toward him, spreading her arms. "Uncle, pardon me for asking, is everything all right with Claire?" Cindy dared to ask. "Everything's fine," Uncle Charles assured her. "I just thought I'd relieve my little sister while I'm here. At least let her get away from the daily evening rush to daycare. My contract's up, so I'm just visiting family for a vacation. I don't know how much yet." I don't know how much. He was probably waiting for Cindy to ask him something. What he did for a living where he worked. But Cindy just nodded and said, "Okay, I see," and immediately felt how stupid and boring it sounded. "Oh, I almost forgot," slapped himself lightly on the forehead of the guy. "This is for you," and held out a box of expensive candy. Cindy and her mom used to get them on holidays. "Thank you." Cindy was surprised. "What's the gift for?" "In honor of our acquaintance." The boy smiled. The next day he brought roses, 5 big cherry roses. Jenna jumped, satisfied with the gift of her favorite educator. Without having time to find the right words, the uncle picked up his niece, promised, "See you tomorrow," and went out the door of the group. Cindy, after a little thought, took the flowers home and told her mother about the new acquaintance. At least he's not a greedy bastard. Mom laughed carelessly, admiring the bouquet. The flowers are gorgeous. Now so many men do not give flowers, even funny to say, consider a woman mercantile, for the desire to get a bouquet or drink a cup of coffee in a beautiful coffee shop. They make the stupidest conclusions. Yes, I will always support a man in difficult moments. Do not reproach, share all the hardships, but I do not intend to do it for a known bogeyman. One good thing, you can see them right away. Oh, I got distracted. Mom loved a lyrical digression, as she called it. She didn't share the details of her personal life with Cindy, but she enjoyed thinking out loud, so you could more or less understand what she was going through. Mom had a happy streak. She was always interested in life, even if life was not very smooth. Most likely, it was because of this that she looked younger than her years and all her classmates. Despite her modest income, she did not hover in the clouds, but just a little soaring above the asphalt and lawns. "Do you look surprised and confused?" she asked Cindy. "Why should I be? It's just business as usual. A young man has decided to court you classically. That's not a bad thing. As long as he's not married. I don't advise you to get involved with married men." "You're so pretty, Cindy. Girls have been guessing since they were kids, and you're like a hesitant, modest girl. Just a piece of antique window dressing. A modest beauty." Mom always managed to make me feel confident that everything was going to be all right. The next day, Charles came for Jenna again and took out from the inside pocket of his jacket 2 rectangles of theater tickets. "Let's go to the theater on Saturday, shall we? I mean, really, I just want to ask if Cindy would be willing to go out with me." "We could try," Cindy said, "and we have a really good theater." On Saturday evening, Nancy dropped by, caught Cindy packing, and rounded her eyes with amusement. "Wow, you're putting on a dress. Something unusual has happened, and your best friend doesn't know." The mom who heard this snickered and disappeared somewhere. Cindy was a little confused. Her friend guessed the events even on an empty place, and here was such a material proof. Cindy was a stay-at-home mom. Could on ready-made patterns or on orders, coordinated to the smallest detail. Could with the connection of his own imagination, when the client himself does not know what he wants. Clients were very different. They paid not only with money, but also with primitive natural exchange, as my mother called it. One girl, sewing a business pantsuit, partially paid with a piece of artificial tie silk. Mom had not been warned of this turn of events. She was counting on the full amount in cash. She and Cindy were just having another dieting spree. That was Mom's expression, too. It's what she called a period of no money. But the girls' times were the same, and she hoped to get out of them by going to the interview, sewing Cindy's mom's suit, and getting her dream job. Informal pay, but it would do. Mom agreed, stroking a narrow section of smooth, navy-colored fabric. And in 2 days, she sewed the girl an elegant tweed suit, and the daughter a simple, elegant dress. Coco Chanel had a little black one and Cindy will have a little turquoise one, she announced. "It looks good on redheads. Mom, it's a masterpiece." Cindy exhaled sincerely, turning around twice in front of the mirror. "But now I have to figure out where to wear it so as not to offend him." "Oh, if only there was a dress, and the occasion will be found," Mom assured me. Nancy tried to borrow the dress once. She was counting on it, but it was made to Cindy's exact measurements. "Nancy, I'll be sure to sew something to fit your tantalizing thighs." Cindy was comforted by her mother, and the dress was waiting on the shoulders in the closet faithful, the only mistress. Now Nancy examined Cindy and made a quick judgment. "I'll assume you just haven't had time to tell me what's new with you. But now you're just not going to get away with it. Nothing much has happened, or you'd be the first to know." Cindy assured me, and it was true. Cindy and Nancy had been friends since kindergarten. Ever since Nancy's parents had come to town and put their daughter in preschool. No one could explain why such different girls had become such good friends. But they hadn't even quarreled once. Somehow there was no reason. Self-loving Nancy, named so in honor of her grandmother, suited her very well, this rare name. There was something icy about it. If their school had been casting for the role of the Snow Queen, Nancy would have been chosen. No one could blame her for anything. She didn't get mad at anyone. She didn't fight with anyone. She didn't gossip about anyone. Nancy was not perfect. She simply had little interest in other people. For a select few, she made an exception. Among them was her childhood friend Cindy. Nancy's mother was very pleased with their friendship. In her opinion, when Charles called, Cindy was long since ready. They were sitting in the kitchen. Mom and Nancy were drinking coffee and chocolate chip cookies, and Cindy was just waiting and trying to appear casual. "I'll be right out," she promised into her phone and looked out the fourth-floor window into the street, followed by Nancy. Charles parked in the driveway, got out of the car, looked up. "An Audi," Nancy said. "I wonder if it was a credit car." Everything was going great, as Mom would classically define it. After several years of working in the North, Charles had planned a vacation at his folks' place 2 months. Then he had Bern in his plans, especially since it wasn't far away. He had already bought a studio on the outskirts 2 years ago and had been renting it out all this time. Now he would ask the tenants to vacate the apartment for the landlord, live and look for a job in Bern. Toward the end of his 2nd month in his hometown, Charles made one more item in his plans. One Saturday evening, he unexpectedly came to visit with a bouquet and a cake, met his mother, and immediately announced, "Evelyn, I have serious intentions. I want to marry Cindy. I'll be honest with you, we'll have to wait. I have to find a job in Bern that will provide for my family. I'm used to good wages in the North, but it's harder to find that kind of work in civilization. If I can't find one, I'll go back on shift. I need a bigger apartment for my family instead of a studio. You're a sensible man, Charles. That's not a bad thing. But I'm guessing this is the first time Cindy's heard of your plans together." That was the plain truth. Cindy was caught off guard, and she was no good at pretending. In those 2 months, she had fallen so self-consciously in love that everything else in her life had taken a back seat, seemed unimportant. She felt so good that she was afraid to think about the future, so as not to jinx it with her plans. She had never been superstitious before, but now she was. She dared to look, only very far away. Robert was going to Bern. They would call each other. He would come for the weekend as promised. She would wait and rush the weekend. For how long? She tried not to think. "I wanted to talk to you and Cindy at once." "Cindy, will you be my official bride?" "I will," Cindy said. She had imagined it differently, but she was still very happy. She wanted to hug Robert, but was shy in front of her mother. He was sitting solemn too, like a headmaster at a banquet. "I'll bring the ring from Bern. There's no good jewelry shop here. I'm sorry it was so awkward. We realize not everything can be calculated and planned." Cindy's mom calmed him down. A spontaneous decision isn't always worse than a well-considered one. "Am I lucky to have a mother-in-law?" Charles exclaimed. "With a mother-in-law you are," Mom assured him. "And I'm all for total non-interference." "Yes, Mom is," confirmed Cindy. Even her voice seemed unfamiliar to her. It was more melodious today, because everything was singing inside. Charles could have gone to Bern without this offer. She had not expected anything like this from him. It wouldn't even occur to her to take offense that he wouldn't promise anything. It turns out he really cares for her. He wants her to know that he is serious on his part and to wait for him. Being a bride makes the waiting different. It makes it so much easier for her to wait, and the next week just before Robert left, it was her birthday. Charles had booked a banquet at a cafe for Cindy's closest loved ones. At their side were her mom and Nancy. The groom came with his mom and sister and Jenna. "Cindy, you weren't prepared to meet your future mother-in-law on your birthday, were you?" Nancy whispered to her. "Actually, I was," Cindy admitted. "But if Charles wants it that way, I don't mind. By the way, it's your birthday," Nancy reminded her. Jenna almost stayed in Cindy's arms. It was the first time she had ever been to a banquet, even a small one. All her celebrations had been at home and at daycare. She looked with interest at the decorated table and the beautifully folded napkins. Cindy Mom found an approach to Robert's silent mom, and they talked about fabrics. Mom was generally good with all kinds of people, but she liked her privacy best. Clara, Robert's sister, looked tired, but she tried to seem cheerful and lively. Like she should at a birthday party, she praised Cindy in front of her mom. "Does she really like me, and is she so nice?" Cindy thought gratefully. Nancy walked from table to bar to chat with the bartender, a Chinese man who had been brought to their town and to this bar by some unknown wind. She would gracefully sit down on a stool, showing off her beautiful legs, and the bartender should have been grateful to her. Visitors from the neighboring room began to pull up to the bar, obviously because of the white-haired, unruffled beauty. "You and your friend look nothing alike," Robert's mother, who was watching Nancy, told Cindy. "Of course, we're not sisters." Cindy laughed. She would have liked to spend the evening alone with Charles, but it was all right. Jenna is interested, though. She'll probably spend a few days drawing everything she's memorized. Charles gave Cindy a new cell phone for her birthday, and 2 days later he left for Bern. And the usual routine began. Cindy tried her best to get away from work, to switch. She even tried once again to learn sewing from her mother. "Do you miss her that much?" Mom asked understandingly. "Yes," Cindy admitted. "I didn't even expect myself. I thought that such feelings were invented for novels to make them more interesting for women to read. I was sure I'd live in peace. Look how confident she was, not with your jeans." Mom smiled. "In consolation, I can say that I had strong feelings, and I do not regret it at all, and I am very glad. Charles came every week at first, then became every other weekend." Cindy knew it was hard to spend 12 o'clock on the road after a work week and then drive back a day later. Sometimes you just need to sleep at home and not be disturbed. Charles invited Cindy to his house for New Year's Eve and to show her around Bern. Sometimes you need a change of scenery. Cindy was careful to tell her mother. What would she say to that? "Cindy, you really are an antique. Do you think I'm going to talk you out of it?" "No, of course not. We're not in Victorian England, and you're not a schoolgirl. You're a grown-up, independent girl. It's bound to happen at some point. I'm glad for you that it's not too soon and as it happens, but for love. It's important, believe me." Cindy believed her mother. She was sure, without any proof, that her mother understood love. "Who are you going to spend Christmas with, Grandma?" Once upon a time they lived in this little apartment. The 4 of them, Grandma, Grandpa, and Mom and Cindy. Cindy didn't remember Grandpa very well. He had died early, and Grandma had lived with them for a long time. 2 years ago, she had come from the market and told her from the doorstep that she had met an elderly gentleman there who had selflessly helped her carry potatoes and other miscellaneous root vegetables home. She wouldn't have bought so many if the gentleman hadn't come along. She decided to take a chance. Grandma's acquaintance turned out to be a resident of a neighboring town. He had a house in the private sector, where he lived alone. His children lived and worked in Bern and rarely came to visit. His wife had died a few years ago. Christopher had come here for a friend's anniversary, and now he promised to visit more often. Grandma said flirtatiously. Cindy and her mom laughed and forgot about it the next day. Christopher wasn't kidding. He came to see Grandma, and one day she asked her girls for permission to bring him to visit. But Christopher and I aren't students to wander the streets or go to restaurants. He tries to take me out for tea and cakes somewhere. But you can't sit for hours in a supermarket, and we're not interested in the movies. We want to socialize. Of course, Mom and Cindy invited Christopher. He turned out to be a nice man. This ex-physics teacher, a man of rare manhood. He introduced himself with a chuckle. He no longer taught at school, but ran a technical club for children at the local cultural center. It was obvious that he adored his grandmother. He didn't show it on purpose or hide it. Cindy thought it was a little funny at the time, but her mother said she was just a young girl. 6 months later, Grandma and Christopher decided to move in together. Cindy and her mom were invited to visit at Christopher's house, so that they could have peace of mind that Grandma would be living in decent conditions. The house really turned out to be good and even well maintained. Christopher could do everything himself, including women's work. Mom said that she was calm for Grandmother, giving her into safe hands. To Grandmother and Christopher will still have time. Mom answered Cindy's question. And at Christmas, I was also invited to the dacha by a good friend. To be honest, I just wouldn't go if you stayed at home. I would prefer your company. And this way I'll have a romantic Christmas too, maybe. So thank you, daughter. Have a good time in Bern. Cindy and her mother laughed together. She has a wonderful mom after all. Nancy is jealous. You can't talk to her mom like that. You have to choose your words. You can't say the wrong thing. You have to be decent at all times. You have to live by the rules, even the rules your mom doesn't follow. You know what she likes to say? When you're my age, you can do whatever you want. A young girl should behave herself. Where did she get that nonsense from? Nobody thinks like that anymore, only her. Your mom cares what you think and feel. Mine cares that no one can say anything bad about me. That's how we live. I can understand if I was to be married to a millionaire or a sultan. Sultans are millionaires too. Cindy put it in. Uh-huh, continued Nancy, who was not easily thrown off course. So I say there's no point in looking to public opinion. Nobody really thinks about us. Talk for 2 minutes and forget it. Everyone's busy living their own lives, and yet I'm still in the habit of acting the way I used to. Although I'm not under any illusions about meeting a millionaire. Ethan, the hardware store owner, is probably my ceiling. Cindy made no secret of her sympathy for poor Ethan. He'd been a devoted admirer of her friend for almost 4 years. Ever since he'd seen Nancy in a scarlet floor-length dress walking with Cindy from the prom. But while to someone like Cindy's grandmother, Ethan was a decent, serious guy and even a successful businessman, to Nancy he was plain, boring, and rude. But he didn't realize it, because although she argued with her mother, she behaved as she should and didn't get outspoken. Cindy went to Bern for Christmas, and she had never had a happier Christmas, not even as a child, when everything is magical at Christmas time. In the afternoon, Charles would show her around the capital. In the evening, they would go back to his little studio and be alone. Charles said he hadn't made any friends here yet. He only worked, and on weekends, he either went to Cindy's hometown or just slept and watched TV series if he was too tired. Cindy would wake up in the middle of the night and make a wish. They would have friends in Bern when they lived together. They would have a very cozy life and it would be nice to visit them. Cindy helped to choose presents for Robert's mother and sister, and for Jenna, and she also had to drive them. She was a little surprised that Charles didn't want to go to the family by himself. We could spend half the vacation in Bern and half at home. Cindy, I'm exactly at home here. What's there to do there? Where would you and I meet like this? I don't think we'd be able to spend so many nights together. Ma and I aren't exactly close, if you've noticed. I love her, sure, but we don't have much to talk about. Clara likes to whine. She gave birth to Jenna, no one forced her to, and now it's like it's someone else's fault she's having a hard time. Of course I feel sorry for her, but feeling sorry makes you tired. You're just tired. Cindy hastened to justify him. She would find something to say to his mom, Miranda. Think of something to make them feel good. Everyone gets tired sometimes, even those closest to them. True, Cindy couldn't remember her and her grandmother or her mother ever getting so tired of each other, but men must be different. Sometimes you have to leave them alone so they have time to miss each other. She knows too little about it yet. I wonder how Mom is doing. When she wished them a Merry Christmas, her voice was carefree and happy. Cindy sometimes felt that Mama was the same age as she was. The Christmas holidays had passed. The usual dark routine had returned. The calendar hinted at spring, but it didn't look like spring. Charles visited Cindy and his family less and less often after 2 weeks or even 3. Cindy understood, or seemed to understand, but she was restless, anxious. The winds rattled the windows at night, and it seemed to sleepless Cindy that it was bad news knocking at the house, which was hidden from her during the day. Weekends without Robert seemed long and useless. Nancy had somehow become a little distant. She had her own things to do. She had even stopped demanding details of Cindy's personal life. Cindy imperceptibly became friends with Clara, Robert's sister. Clara came to visit with Jenna. The girls drank strong tea with a spoonful of homemade herbal balm, a gift from Grandma Christopher, and her mother read Jenna a book or played with her. It was a little funny and very unfamiliar to have someone address Mommy as Baba Evelyn. But it didn't make the mom herself sad at all. Baba is the child's degree of trust. You silly girls, the girls weren't so stupid. They realized that Cindy was pleased that Clara and Jenna were frequenting their house. It was like Charles was getting so close, and Charles said at every call, "Thank you for your consideration for my girls, Cindy." Mama always admonished them to come by more often, and Robert's mom was slow to invite them over. She's that kind of person. Cindy was reassured by her own mom, and by the way, it's even better. Most likely, she is not interested and does not need to know everything about you. Watching you, controlling you, snooping around, it'll be easier for you if you ever get married. Mom said that in the kindest of ways, without innuendo or double meanings. But Cindy still didn't like it, if ever. Nor was anything else unequivocal. After their promises and arrangements, and all the wonderful things between them, in the spring, when the morning was still cold to gloveless hands, but the parks were already filled with pale green smoke from buds barely bursting on the trees, Cindy had been sent to Bern for a conference. A face-to-face conference for child care providers and educators. Probably some of the family child care providers would have liked a change of scenery and a trip to Bern. But the superintendent sent the free Cindy, who was very sympathetic. Young responsible specialist for all the time of work without conflict with the parents of the pupils. Just the fiancé in Bern, they will see each other. Cindy decided to go without a surprise call. They had not seen each other for more than 2 weeks. An unexpected meeting will make her even happier. "Clara, please don't tell your brother I'm coming. I want to show up out of the blue, surprise him." Clara was silent for a moment, hesitating. And then she asked, "Are you sure, Cindy? Shouldn't we give him a little warning? Do you think your brother would be angry if he saw me? He says he misses me all the time. I don't ask him to. You're right, don't mind him. As my mom likes to say, I'm just very sensitive. The conference started on Monday, and Cindy arrived in Bern on Sunday evening. She took a cab from the subway to Robert's house. She had so many homemade pies and pickles with her. She wanted to catch her breath a little from the road and to look pretty to Charles, not tired. Cindy paid the driver and got out of the cab at the corner of the house. There were roadworks further along, patches on the pavement, and it was a bit of a walk. A couple was saying goodbye at Robert's front door. A shapely girl in a light, unseasonable mini dress and a half coat thrown over her shoulders, with white thick hair down to her shoulders, was kissing a young man on the lips, who lightly embraced her below the waist. She broke the kiss, but continued to stare at her companion. It was Charles, slightly wrinkled and pleased with himself. "Should I say hello to your country girl for you?" Cindy heard a familiar voice, playfully melodic, almost flawless. What is she doing here? Nancy laughed softly, turned away from Robert, and faced Cindy. "There you go. One leaves and one comes in." She wasn't confused, but she didn't wait for an answer. Nancy was leaving in no particular hurry, in her usual gait, what Cindy's mother used to call a catwalk walk. She had known her friend too long and well. She was convinced that Cindy would not run after her, could not bring herself to move. Cindy's travel bags were frozen in her hands, and she had to at least put them on the pavement to lose all their weight, and her fingers wouldn't stretch, wouldn't obey. Charles, as if nothing had happened, took hold of the handles of the bags and pulled them toward him. "Let's take them and go home." Cindy obediently followed him as if in a fog. In the elevator, she stood looking at her feet, or in the corner, unable to look up at Robert, as if she were afraid of seeing someone else entirely. In the apartment, she sat down on the edge of a chair on the corner of the table, her back to the disassembled sofa. "Bunny, I didn't think you were such a child as your charges in the younger group." Charles addressed her condescendingly. "It's not like you and me, pure physiology. We don't see each other much. I'm a healthy man, and I have needs. I was sure you would realize that, and not come without warning, so as not to embarrass me and yourself. I would never have let you run into each other here if I had known. I'm not afraid of you coming without warning any time." Cindy replied, "Zai, that's why I'm marrying you. You have all the qualities of a good wife. This is your pseudo-girlfriend, with pleasure spend time, but only idiots marry them. Yeah, you're not an idiot. You want a country girl at home who's easy to fool. Zai, don't mess with my head. It doesn't suit you. People like her just want to assert themselves at the expense of others, at least to make a mean comment to someone more fortunate. And you fell for it like a little girl." "Yeah, she gets leftovers, and she convinces herself that she's beaten someone." Cindy listened to him. She dares to look up. He doesn't think he's wrong. He sees himself as a gift, a prize being fought over. I guess it's good to be like that, as long as there are fools like Cindy. She stood up and picked up a smaller bag from the floor. "Here's your other one with the pies in it, and the winter cooking." Charles, with a conciliatory smile, blocked her path by the front door. "Don't be silly, Cindy. Where are you going for the night?" "To a hotel. I have a departmental reservation. I'm here for a conference, not to catch you red-handed." "Wow, we're so strict. Are we rehearsing an insulted wife?" "Let me through." "Yes, come in, of course. I'm a beast. When you cool down, call me where you're staying and when we're free." Let's go out after my work and your conference." He was smiling in a friendly way. It was funny, he didn't even think to hide it, or at least play remorseful. Cindy didn't even have tears. It was like a stone had been placed on her chest. She decided not to call her mom. She wouldn't help anyway. She'd just get upset. She'd think a lot, think in silence, and so orders slower. At 7:00 p.m. the next day, when she had just returned to her room, Charles called. Cindy had agreed with herself yesterday that she would not answer the phone, but she broke her promise. People change, realize things, even overnight. You can't rule out that slim little chance. Charles suggested businesslike when she gave him the address where to pick you up. He didn't doubt it at all. She realized wryly. People don't change, you just get to know them better over time. But maybe he was just pretending to be so cynical. If he didn't care about Cindy, he wouldn't be calling now. He'd be taking the opportunity to get rid of his annoying friend easily. Why all those emails and postcards? The calls, the gifts, the introductions to families. He loved her, she couldn't be wrong. She wasn't some posh, unapproachable socialite to win her over out of ego. So he does love her. She just didn't know how to express it the way Cindy wanted to. She gave the address. Charles arrived, quickly, brought a bouquet of white lilies, suggested they go to the premiere of a comedy. He was the same as he'd always been, joking confidently, opening the door with a warning. Cindy wondered if he was pretending, or if he really didn't see that she seemed frozen or petrified now. He was chuckling quietly at the movie, enjoying the evening. And Cindy didn't care much at all about what was happening on the screen around her. "Shall we go home?" he suggested lazily after the movie. "Let's order delivery for dinner, a bottle of wine." Cindy was silent, remembered the Nancy front room, the disassembled bed. "I can't go there yet. You know, this hurts me, and you don't even apologize, even though it's so easy. Just because I love you doesn't mean you can do this to me." "Here we go," Charles said curtly, wrinkling his nose. Everything was fine, and now it's back to this kindergarten stuff. Really, your element is kindergarten. You're in the right profession. He turned and strode leisurely to the car. Cindy could hardly restrain herself from rushing after him. She was afraid. Even his back showed that he might be gone for good, and she could do nothing about it. She can't hold him back, make him regret what he's done and apologize. She can't do anything. She's a hen. She's a hen. She's a pussycat. She's a hen. Nancy's right. The third day of the conference was over. Cindy was going home. Charles still hadn't called. It's a good thing that Mom and Clara, not to disturb her and at the wrong time, didn't call her, but messaged her. It's easier to reply there that everything is fine. The voice in the text is not audible. Before the train, Cindy stopped to buy a small gift for Jenna and went to the train station. Just as she was settling down on a side shelf and the platform slowly floated past, the bell rang. Charles. I ran to the vestibule, tripping over other people's legs, stretched out into the aisle, as if I couldn't answer it in the car. I thought it would be better to speak to you directly, so that there would be no misunderstandings, so that you wouldn't make up things for yourself. Robert's voice sounded soft and almost indifferent. For some reason, Cindy remembered a Methodist at a conference, tired from the presentation and the buffet. You and I shouldn't continue our relationship. I was wrong, I admit it. We're not right for each other. You're over-dramatizing life, and you can get tired of it quickly. We'd both get bored, and if I'm feeling it now, you know there's no point. You can keep the presents, be happy. Say hi to my family, I'll come by sometime. He sent that text and dropped the call. That's what it's called, dropping the call. That Mom's quietly sad expression. Cindy knew it well. Mom, you knew this would happen, and you didn't say anything to me, not once. I'm like an old crow that just wants to caw. I didn't like Charles very much, but my opinion is just my opinion. I'm entitled to be wrong, and it's not that uncommon for me to be wrong. Why would I want to ruin the best parts of my life? There were good things, weren't there? There was. Cindy exhaled. Well then, it's all good. And there's nothing to regret? There was and there will be. Not with him. Do all men look at it that way? Why would I even want to be in a relationship? Come on, don't generalize. They're as different as we are. It's true that fidelity isn't for everyone. Things happen in life. I haven't judged anyone in a long time. But a good, decent man behaves differently. If his girlfriend, especially his fiancée, caught him with someone else, of course, when he loves someone, even if he doesn't love her anymore, he still behaves differently. And you realize it yourself. Sometimes a guy is an incorrigible womanizer, but he's a good person. In Robert's case, it's not the cheating that matters, it's how he behaved afterwards. You got rid of such a piece of dumb daughter. It's worth celebrating. I lost my friends too, Mom. Nancy and I have never had a serious quarrel since we were kids. We trusted each other, and now, even if I wanted to, I couldn't even trust her in the smallest things. It wasn't an accident that she came to Bern to see him. It's deliberate. And Clara herself won't want to keep in touch with me after her brother and I broke up. Nancy wasn't a friend, she was just a traveling companion. People like that are friends when it suits them. If it's not favorable, they'll kick you in the head with their boots and move on. No one to regret either. Clara is not a stupid girl, though her mother and brother think otherwise. She'll figure out who she wants to hang out with. If she distances herself from you, it's because she's embarrassed about her brother. It happens to people with a conscience. Someone else did something bad, and you're embarrassed. When do you have to go to work? Mom could jump from one topic to another in a heartbeat. Cindy was used to it, but sometimes she couldn't keep up with Mom's thinking. Monday, today's my arrival day, and tomorrow is my day off after the conference. Going out of town for a weekend of sadness. Or if I'm lucky, not even sad. The friend I spent Christmas with has a cottage in a magical place, almost in the middle of the woods. There are snowdrops in the sunny spots. Mom, you've never introduced me to your friends. Is there something serious here? Just a man I'd love you to meet. His name is No. It's both serious and not serious, a little bit of everything. Anyway, I'm welcome to visit with my daughter, my mom or Christopher. There's a dog and 2 ginger cats. Oranges, tangerines. Let's go. Charles was going on vacation. It was the first time he'd ever been so lucky. He was going on vacation alone without his wife. His wife, having received an invitation to a friend's wedding in Spain, got excited, packed up and flew away, picking up the speed of the Boeing from the very threshold. Not even for the sake of decency do not offer your husband to keep you company. He asked. Nope. The wife shook her head. There will be ours, our yoga course. You are not interested, and I deserve a vacation and complete relaxation. And I want to see a real Spanish wedding, Spanish mother-in-law, and other highlights. And you can go somewhere to make up for it. Does your dad know you need a vacation? And she flew away happy and contented. It was even annoying that he wasn't jealous anymore. Letting her go on vacation alone, just to have a vacation without her husband. They hadn't been together that long. Charles married the daughter of the technical director of a small company with which he worked as a development engineer. They met at a summer corporate retreat where employees could bring a family member with them if they wished. There was a lot of people. contests, fireworks, dancing to pops, all sorts of nonsense for the accountant's amusement. A full-figured but bright, confident brunette came up to him as he was bored at the bar on the open veranda. What kind of cocktail would I like? She wasn't exactly Charles's type, but if she showed interest, it was indecent to ignore the chance. Charles ordered another cocktail. We drank and danced. "I'm going out for a minute," the girl said after the dance. "Stay here, don't leave. While your lady goes to powder her nose, I'll tell you something." The mocking voice of David's colleague sounded behind my shoulder. "So you don't get too excited. It's our boss's daughter. The only favorite, spoiled, does not want to work. She studies here and there. She'll sigh, 'It's not my thing.' She'll go and live in Vietnam, go and study something new again. Dad dreams of marrying her off. She'll be 30 soon. For him, that's the age when girls should be worried about not getting married. I'm talking to you because that's not the best butterfly for your herbarium." Charles managed to say a big thank you to David, only mentally. He grinned and disappeared into the crowd of cowworkers, barely noticing that his companion was returning. If Charles had had any interest in Molly, it had diminished with the news of her parentage. It's better to play the right nerdy careerist to make Molly bored and switch to a more interesting object. You can tell she's a gambler. The careerist turned out Charles not badly, even talented in some places. There's a reason he was in good standing with the company. But that damned careerist Molly, too, had taken a fancy to him. She preferred to think of herself as a romantic, but in fact she was determined, strong-willed, and tenacious. Charles, who liked to set the tone in relationships and get the girls talking, felt driven for the first time. Molly had asked for his phone number herself when she left the corporate party with her dad, and she'd called him herself, never doubting that he'd welcome the call. She could call in the middle of the day. We talked about cars, boats. Charles was invited to go fishing in a narrow circle, in which revolved quite closed, serious John. There was a lot to think about. He seemed to be seen as a future son-in-law. His relationship with Molly was a protracted fling. Charles just didn't want to complicate his life for fear of unintended consequences. In the eyes of Molly's parents, he clearly looked like a well-mannered, serious young man with moral principles who needed more than just a bed. It would be very funny if it wasn't happening to him. Charles, a week before the fishing trip, read several thematic sites and bought himself the right equipment and the right spinning rod with which it is not ashamed to appear in a serious fishing community. He enjoyed fishing as a hobby. He was looking for an upside to his position, and that's the first thing that came to mind. Basically, he just wasn't planning on getting married yet. He was quite happy with the advantages of being single, but if he reconsidered his plans, things were looking up. The second such chance for a guy from a small town, from the most ordinary family, may not be. Without the right acquaintances and favorable kinship, he expected only routine work and slow career growth. That is, if in an office with business trips without a shift, and he didn't want to shift anymore. Charles liked comfort. If he was honest with himself, the prospect of marrying Molly, say, the daughter of the head of the security department, suited him just fine. Gray, with a heavy chin and the look of a school vice principal, would be a really dull option. Molly is bright, draws male attention to herself, and on the whole she is a good-natured, cheerful girl. If you don't look at the little things, Charles was well aware of what embarrassed him the most. He couldn't stand feminists and seriously believed that most of women's woes are from their influence. He makes the money and dictates the rules. He envisioned his wife as a pretty, gentle girl who owed him a lot and recognized his dominance. He'd had one once. almost 3 years ago in his hometown. It seems it was in another life. Cindy's kindergarten teacher, cozy knave. He actually almost married her, thought she was just right. If I'd gotten my hands on her girlfriend, who was playing hard to get, the hunter's appetite kicked in. And his girl was in the wrong place at the wrong time and saw them. And she walked around with such a reproach in her eyes and seriously waited for repentance, though she had looked him in the mouth before. Charles saw the devil in a quiet pool and changed his mind about getting married. He had achieved everything on his own, not to have his standards imposed on him. Now here we go. He was definitely not going to live by his own rules. Charles hadn't decided overnight Friday and Saturday what line of behavior to take at the informal meeting. John, his two friends, and his cousin greeted Charles cordially and did not show their superiority. Late in the evening, when the company drank and dined in a cozy shooting cottage, Evgenievich called Charles to the terrace and asked directly to you seriously with Molly. Just honestly explain like a man to a man. I'll understand. I love your daughter. John stated, Charles, whatever happens, and what's the holdup? She's waiting. It's just a fashion for girls to be independent these days. In fact, they're waiting for a man to take the initiative. You know that without me? I'm not a boy anymore. I realize I can't give her the standard of living she's used to. Caught the Charles part. I'm afraid I'm falling short. I don't want to look like a slick, provincial Alfonso. It's not for me. I realize Molly deserves someone more successful. Look how proud we are. Okay, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. Now I'll tell you. My daughter has my character. It doesn't matter to us that you're not status. It's all gonna come if you want it to. And you have it. I can see that, and I'm gonna help you. I care about my daughter's happiness, not what anyone thinks. I don't work for myself like Papa Carlo. When you have kids of your own, you'll understand. Molly never wanted to get married. She's never wanted to get married, but she wants to marry you. So don't hesitate and don't procrastinate. Propose. My mother and I will organize any wedding you want. You can have 300 people, or just the two of you in the Maldives. Thank you for your understanding, John. Just as long as it works out. That's how Charles got married. Molly didn't want a crowded wedding. She wanted a modest ceremony and a romantic exotic cruise. Weddings are only for drunken guests and hackneyed plots, she said. Charles was grateful to her. First of all, he was bored by crowded gatherings. Second, he realized that his mother and Clara would look out of place against Molly's friends and peers, who were groomed and carefree. Poor, simple relatives of a provincial Alfonso. And no lavish wedding, there is no demonstration of their kin. Charles called home and announced that he was getting married. They would go on a wedding trip, and then they would stop by sometime to visit with gifts. Since then, Charles has never gotten around to stopping by even by himself. Mom came to visit a couple of times at their new apartment. She liked her daughter-in-law, sociable, friendly, energetic. Her son listens to her, and he's very much in favor of control. You can see that. That's what Mom told Charles. He even listened calmly, did not object. His wife really is a good influence. At the airport, looking for his flight on the electronic board, Charles stumbled, stepped on something hard, and almost twisted his foot. He cursed quietly, looked under his feet, and saw a child's wooden pew with letters on it, almost identical to the ones he had as a child. This one rolled farthest away. A thin, red-haired girl was collecting the other cubes in a box a little farther away. He hadn't thought of her in 1,000 years, but he recognized her immediately. Cindy, my goodness! She hadn't changed a bit. Still busy with her children's toys. Well, that's to be expected. She straightened up, looked around for someone Charles hadn't seen. He took advantage of it, jumped up quietly from behind, handed her the ill-fated cube from behind her shoulder, and suddenly in a stern inspector's voice, asked, "What is Cindy suddenly doing at the airport on a weekday?" Accompanying a daycare center on a tour of the uncles of the pilots and aunts of the flight attendants. Cindy shuddered slightly, barely noticeable, and turned around. Confusion and bewilderment flashed in her eyes for a few seconds, but was immediately replaced by a calm smile. "Cindy rests sometimes." With a softly indifferent grin, she replied. She ignored the tactless prank. Charles wanted suddenly to continue the conversation and embarrass her after all. But Cindy saw who she was waiting for. A little girl with a mop of auburn curls and bright red sneakers was running toward her. Behind her came a panting, cheerful girl and a preschool boy. "Mom, it's okay. We're all cleaned up and everything is fine," the little girl reported to Cindy in a ringing voice. "Good for you, Foxy." Cindy laughed. "Take the cubes, put them in Mason's backpack, and don't look in anyone else's backpacks." I played customs with Mason. I found the little girl right away. She looked just like Cindy. Same thick hair, same clear skin with a few freckles. Only her eyes were not light brown, but blue, not almond-shaped, but almost round, big, and mischievous. You can already see that she will grow up to be very beautiful. Charles suddenly thought, "Thank you, Kathy, for putting this gang in order." She turned to her friend. "And I met an old acquaintance while I was waiting for you." And she gave Charles a polite nod. "We should go. Have a nice vacation or business trip." "And to you girls," Charles nodded. The friends separated the children, taking each of them by the hands, and went to the baggage claim line. Somewhere in the middle of the line for the Bali flight, an elderly woman with suitcases was waiting for them. I wonder if he was just choosing between Cyprus and Bali, but he chose Cyprus. It would have been funny if they had flown to the same resort town. But we didn't. And probably, with children choose other resorts, as John likes to say, will be their own children, you will understand. Where did you fly away, carefree, funky mood? Handed over the suitcase, sat at the bar with cognac and coffee. It seemed that at the opposite end of the hall still flashed this four, moms with children. Cindy the girl, about 5 years old. As far as he understood about children. They'd said goodbye just about 6 years ago. He could very well be her father. And his eyes. What's he getting so worked up about, though? There's no such thing as eyes. And if the child had been his, he would have been informed. Sister Clara, who never forgave him for dumping her girlfriend and won't even meet his wife or Cindy herself. But how does it usually go? Let's make up. Love, we're having a baby. Or her mom or his mom. At least as a warning that they might sue for child support. Nobody said a word. It doesn't work that way. So there's probably another option here. Cindy was looking for comfort after they broke up. And here was someone seriously comforting. That's fine. It's better to think that way. Anyway, she's not poor now. She's off to the seaside with the baby. When they met, she'd never been further than Bern. Charles had no intention of thinking about Cindy any further. He was trying to play a game. To guess which of the spicy girls in his line of sight was going where he was going. But the guessing game didn't distract him. There were no really interesting girls in sight, and he kept looking for a familiar silhouette. She had changed. No, she didn't look older. She was still just like a girl, a freshman. Light, graceful. There was a calm confidence about her, and something else elusive that made her stand out among the others. Yes, she'd always had good taste, but it was less and less frequent now, and that was unlikely to change. At least she should be able to enjoy her vacation. Molly called from Spain several times a day, counting nighttime if she suddenly became sad at night, or on the contrary, wanted to immediately share her impressions. To have an affair in such an environment, when at any time can be a video call from his wife, only to fray his nerves. In Cyprus, Charles suddenly realized that he was really tired, and if he hung out not in a bar, not on the beach, then on a fishing trip. In the company of a quiet local uncle of age, John's father-in-law. Charles was even a little scared that he was enjoying this kind of vacation. Is he getting old or something? Somehow very early for this return to Bern, with fishing bikes for John, and normal life went on. For the next year, Molly drove him crazy with mood swings. They couldn't conceive. It got to the point where she decided to see a doctor. She hated going to the doctor. She made an exception for the dentist and presented it as a sacrifice for beauty. Going to the gynecologist was even harder for her. Charles waited doomedly for her to share the details, but breathed a sigh of relief. Molly had suddenly stopped sharing, whispering only to her mother. While she waited for the results of the tests, he did not forget to give her duty signs of attention and did not ask about anything, just to continue to leave him alone. But one day she came not like herself, fell back in the chair, and said with a tremor in her voice, "I have no chance." Here Charles rushed to comfort her, just as she had expected. He did feel a little sorry for her. She wasn't a bad girl. It wasn't fair that she was so unlucky. He said that doctors sometimes make mistakes, that they would still hope and try. You know, all the things you're supposed to do in cases like this. He himself was not depressed. He had no burning desire to have children. To be honest, he saw no tragedy in life without them. The only fat disadvantage he saw was that, without children, Molly would have to take care of him and control him. After another year, Molly, having consulted with Mom and Dad, voiced Charles' decision. They would adopt a child, or rather adopt a child. She wanted a girl. Charles, accustomed to show firmness, but from fright remembered the past and answered categorically and adamantly no. Don't even try to approach me with that proposition again. You've grown up like a greenhouse flower. You don't know life, you have no idea what genes these rejects might have. I don't really believe in upbringing when there's been 7 generations of marginalized people. No matter what you do, the genes will show up. No, that's all. He was sure Molly wouldn't leave him because of that. She loves him too much. She'll whine from time to time. But he put up with that. He thought his marriage was pretty successful overall, better than most. Then, in the late fall, a vaguely familiar, melodic female voice called out to him at the mall. "Oh, Charles." He turned around. He remembered her not at once, but he remembered her. A perky girl with a rare name, Nancy, who had once wanted to wrestle him away from her friend Cindy. She'd really grown up. Pretty, boring, respectable, and by the looks of it, well-to-do. "Hello, Nancy. You look good." "Oh, come on. It's just a courtesy. I'm waiting for a friend. I've been through the galleries twice. If you're not in a hurry, let's have coffee." "Why not? Let's do it." We sat down in a cafe. He only took coffee. Nancy also took cognac. "I'm fine. I don't drive. I'm not good at it. There are people like that." "My husband drives me. It has its advantages. It's convenient, yes. You live in Bern?" "Yes. We moved here 5 years ago. Everything's fine. By the way, Cindy lives here. Your ex-fiancée and my ex-girlfriend. I know that from my mom. I shouldn't have looked at you the other day. I just lost a good friend. But I'm okay with that. It's been a long time. Do you have a wife, children, or are you a love tramp, Casanova?" "I have a wife, no children. Not that I know of, anyway." Well then, you don't know much. Nancy remarked without a trace of schadenfreude. You really don't know, or just don't want to know. Charles had already guessed what she was going to tell him. Our Cindy has a daughter with you. Lisa, she's already in school. You'd have to be such a principled girl like Cindy not to ask you for child support. I don't think it's my child. My mother or sister would have told me. Mother, I suppose. If someone had told her, Clara would know, but her friend asked her to keep quiet. When you and Cindy split up, she moved to Bern a couple months later, got a job at a private daycare center. Some friend of her mother's, Aunt Evelyn, helped her. Then she married him. Imagine that. And my mom also has a friend at our women's health clinic. She told me that Cindy came to see them and that Cindy was pregnant. It's definitely your baby. When it comes to Cindy, you can be sure. So Cindy and Aunt Evelyn didn't say anything to anyone. It was just a quick getaway to Bern. Cindy left. She gave birth here, and she lives here. I don't know her address. I don't know her phone number, Daddy. Why are you telling me this now? I don't even know. Someone must have told you. You decide whether you need this information or not. Nancy laughed softly. Another 6 months passed. Spring came. Molly had lost weight from worry. Charles had always found thin people more attractive, but his wife didn't like thinness. She'd even forgotten his adamant statement about adoption. She kept asking, demanding, crying. But one day she met him from work, soft, calm, and thoughtful. After dinner, she made them both a cocktail, sank quietly into a chair and said, "You already have a child, so you don't want someone else's. You don't even ask where I went for 2 days. You're not interested. I went to your sister's. I've been wanting to meet her for a while, so I thought, why not now? They're both great sisters and nieces. I got it out of Clara that you had a kid. You know how hard it is to get rid of me, don't you? No, no, no. I'm not gonna fight. That was way before my time. On the contrary, I have something good to offer you. Don't laugh. I've given it a lot of thought, and it's a good thing. Why don't you meet my daughter? Why don't you come and visit us on the weekends? We'll give her gifts, support her financially, just be friends. We'll have a child in the house, and it won't be someone else's child. I know it's not uncommon for a girl to be friends with her stepmother. She's so pretty, your daughter. Clara showed me a picture of her. And very capable, as Clara says. She's a quick learner. Her mother will be very happy that they suddenly have support. Molly, I myself found out 6 months ago by accident that I had a daughter. You may not believe it, but it's true. If her mom needed my support, she wouldn't have kept me in the dark for so many years. She's a different kind of person, a little weird. Clara told me how you two broke up. Tried to be unemotional, smoothing over the facts, probably felt sorry for me. It's not for me to judge you. I had 2 abortions when I was young, and now I have no children. So as far as moralizing goes, that's not for me. If you're uncomfortable talking to your daughter's mom, I'll talk to her. Maybe it's better that way. I'll be honest, I'll explain everything, she'll understand. I'll be Lisa's aunt like Clara. Molly, I always thought you were a practical, reasonable woman, at least adequate. Why do you have such crazy ideas? Well, find yourself a hobby. Don't obsess about the kids. That's ridiculous. If you worked like me, you wouldn't have time to think about nonsense. Aunts, uncles, have you ever thought how stupid I'd feel in this situation? Like you think a lot about my feelings yourself. She wanted to say something else, it was obvious, but she kept quiet. Well, it was great that she had learned to stop, at least for a while. Cindy and Lisa were returning from a sports, ballroom dancing class, walking leisurely. Lisa was enthusiastically telling her news, demonstrating at the same time the new moves she had been working on today. It was very difficult for her to stop right after class. The instructor noted her flexibility and plasticity. The day is warm today. The sun is already warming them, not just shining on them. In the playground outside their house, away from two local grandmothers with strollers, a strange woman sat on a bench. When she saw that Cindy had spotted her, she stood up and walked toward them. A well-groomed brunette with a beautiful tired face, not a single wrinkle, but you could see that she was a grown woman, not a student, but definitely not one of the moms or other relatives of the children from her daycare center. "Hello, are you Cindy and Lisa?" Greetingly, but somewhat tensely, she asked. "Yes, my name is Cindy. This is my daughter." Cindy replied in her tone, but a little wary. This didn't seem like an official visit. "Cindy, do you have a moment to talk privately? Can we talk here?" "Lisa, take a little walk around the grounds. Please chat with our neighbors." "I won't be long." "Okay." The girl replied with a curious glance in the direction of the stranger. "I'll be around if you need me." The brunette smiled, escorting her with an attentive look, and hurriedly introduced herself. "My name is Molly. I'm the wife of Charles, Lisa's father." There was a careful silence between them for a moment. Cindy broke it gently first. "All right, let's get acquainted. I won't even try to hide my bewilderment. Why do you need us?" "If we haven't threatened your family's budget so far, we won't. I realized that a long time ago. That's not why I came to see you. I wanted to ask you to let Lisa meet her father. Has Charles become so shy over the years that he needs an intermediary?" Cindy laughed softly. "If he suddenly wanted to communicate with his daughter, he would have come himself. All the more reason for you to mediate in such a matter. I can see he hasn't changed. He's as indifferent to the feelings of women as ever." "I'm sorry, Molly. No offense. Just the facts." Cindy felt a strange sympathy for her new acquaintance. From Charles's wife, there was no hostility, no sense of superiority. She did not scrutinize Cindy, did not evaluate her, did not compare her with herself. She just looked at her expectantly and thoughtfully, choosing her words. "Cindy, this is going to sound strange, but I would be glad to have my husband's daughter in our home. I have no children of my own, and he doesn't want an adopted one." She fell silent, giving herself pause again to choose her words. "I think I understand. I don't need to explain further." Cindy stopped her. "I'll tell you a platitude. Doctors sometimes make mistakes. I work in a kindergarten. I know many such stories. Every daycare center has a kid whose mom thought she was infertile. Hope for your chance. The attitude helps a lot. As for Lisa, I am getting married in a month, and for Lisa, my future husband is her daddy. She doesn't even question it. By the way, neither do I. Imagine if this were your child and your situation. What would you do?" Yeah, I'm not coming back. Sorry for the stupid idea, the time wasted. I'd have a very different conversation with me if I were you. And I'm sure you'd understand, too." Cindy replied, "Thank you." Molly nodded. She turned and walked toward the parking lot, waving to Lisa as she went. "I felt sorry for myself at first," Cindy thought, looking after her. "I've never been as lonely as she was, though. Sebastian won't arrive from his business trip until tomorrow. Lisa is already asleep, and she's not sleeping a wink. No, there's nothing to be afraid of course Charles won't come. He didn't like to complicate his life, and he was hardly in love. When they parted, Cindy was no longer lying to herself. She was in love with a man she should stay away from in the first place. How could I have been such a blind fool? She asked then, telling her mom. It wasn't even her mom. It was a question of space, but Mom was answering. If we were smart in love, humanity would have died out long ago. Convincingly, she answered, so that doesn't speak to your personal stupidity. It's just the way things work. And I've had that happen to me. What do you think? See, I'm alive and enjoying life. I don't think I could ever really enjoy anything again. And it seemed to me the main thing is you don't force yourself. You don't have fun, not sincerely. You want to wear mourning for love, then wear it. It will end on its own, you'll see. Maybe psychologists would burn me at the stake, but that's what I think. Cindy believed Mom. Mom was not only her own psychologist, but she was also a psychologist to others. Cindy was sure that many of her clients had been coming to her for years, not so much for a closet makeover, but for a chat. They talk to their mom and see that their problems are not so terrible and insoluble. And then came a series of happy coincidences. Mom introduced Cindy to her wonderful friend No. No's older sister Camille was the head of a prestigious private daycare center in Bern and was visiting. And she lured Cindy to join her, even after she learned she was pregnant. Cindy had doubts at first about how she would be alone in Bern with a baby. Camille reassured her. Not alone. We're already family. Your mom and my brother are about to get married. I live alone in a big apartment as it happens. I can't stand being alone. I'd be glad to have your company if you don't like it, or if things don't work out. You can always go home. Cindy was a little shaky. She wasn't ready to leave her mom, her junior group, Jenna. She wondered how Camille would feel. Her mom gave her a shocked look. Don't think I'm kicking you out by deciding to start a new life, but I'd go if I were you. You should try it. It's not just that fate throws up such coincidences to make it easier for you to start over. That's how Cindy ended up in Bern. She lived, worked, raised Lisa, and a year ago, she met Sebastian in a supermarket, accidentally putting a chicken in his cart instead of her own. And it was the last chicken on sale. We laughed. Cindy was already married to Sebastian for 3 years when she found out she was expecting a baby. She went to the antenatal clinic to check in and bumped into Molly at the entrance. She had put on a lot of weight, but it suited her. "Oh, Cindy," she cheered. "Look, you were right. You must be a good witch." She pointed to her prominent belly, and Molly looked different, glowing with a contented calm. "I'm so glad you and Charles are doing well." Cindy said sincerely, "I'm fine, but I have no idea about Charles. We don't talk. I've only been with him for, 2 months since I met him. I tried like a stubborn jackass to get him to adopt a girl from the orphanage. He even stopped calling me by my first name, just Hen. They say I'm obsessed with the desire to have a child. I'm limited, and I really already had something like insanity. I'm used to getting what I want. Of course, it was hard on me. Charles had a young girl. I didn't feel anything special when I found out, but I felt sorry for the girl. I met her and drew a verbal portrait of our mutual Charles out of female solidarity. By the way, we are still friends with her. And Charles she left not immediately, of course, but the main thing herself. I gave up. I decided to get away. I went on vacation alone so I wouldn't have to see his perpetually disgruntled face. And there I had a resort romance, and I suddenly saw thanks to him, and my husband does not love me at all, and I do not love him anymore. I was wrong about him. I'm weird. Why should I be surprised? So I came home and got a divorce. He even quit his job out of fear, as if my father would hurt him. He never would. My dad's the wrong man, and my resort fling turned out to be a serious love affair. Who knew? And now I'm about to be a mom. I'm pretty sure I know the real reasons why Charles and I didn't have kids. He didn't love me, not at all. And it worked for some reason, like contraception. Everyone laughs at me, even my mom. One old doctor said, "Yeah, she's seen cases like this before. I'm not the first, and she believes me. If it feels right, it's right. Bring your baby to our daycare later." Cindy smiled. "I was just going to say, I'll bring my baby to your daycare center." Molly laughed. "I'm having a son. You don't have to wait so long. Come visit us with your husband." And they exchanged phone numbers. Cindy went home happy. She remembered Molly sometimes, and it was a sad memory. It was nice to know that another person's life had changed for the better. It seems like they're definitely going to be family friends. If that's how I feel, that's how it is.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Daniel pulled his heavy bag out of the dusty, smelly bus. He saw himself, his old bag, and the entire interior of the gasoline and hot dust-stained bus as dirty, wrinkled, and in need of immediate washing. The steps of the old bus were spattered with seed husks and small scraps of paper. Daniel slid his bag down them, kicked it squeamishly into the thick side, shaking it off automatically, and wiped away the sweat. What a heat wave this year! The passengers on the bus were drenched in sweat, but at least there was some breeze blowing through the open hatch, though the smell of gasoline booze was unbearable, and gusts of wind cooled people's faces. And here, in the middle of a huge field, where only a lonely sign stood, there was nothing to breathe. The heat is standing, in the face carries the hot smell of the field, on which some places are already becoming obvious splotches, so burned out grass under the scorching sun. And the yellowing grass and pathetic bushes on the roadside looked almost as uncomfortable and unkempt as the bus that had just left, hiding in the clouds of dust. Here it was his native side, such a familiar and yet forgotten place. What a sin to say! It looked rather shabby, his native village, there on the hill, and it was still 1.5 kilometers to carry the bag to it. He wanted to get here as soon as possible. After all the things he had seen in the past few years, Daniel was not interested in this landscape, or the village streets, which stretched from top to bottom and were clearly visible from here. He was a practical man. Rather than reminisce about unfulfilled dreams, he should think better of where to stay. He didn't want to go straight to Lucy's house. Daniel followed the path that led to the center of the village. His second cousin lived there. They hadn't seen each other for 10 years, if not more, and there wasn't much friendship. But his sister might let him stay there. It was good that Abigail didn't like his ex-wife Lucy, so maybe it would work out. Daniel recognized the old woman who was coming toward him at once. A tall, heavy figure approached from across the street, leaning heavily on a stick and limping on both legs. There was no mistaking her for anyone else. It was their neighbor, the terror of the whole village, strict and fair Clara. Since she had worked all her life as the head of a dairy farm, she was used to giving orders to milkmaids and half-drunk cattlemen with a thunderous voice. She was also known for the fact that she was not afraid of any superiors, and she always told everyone in the eyes what she thought, and she thought in the collective farm way, in the owner's way, so that everything was fair. That's how she defined her attitude to life. She had no husband, so she lived on her own, taking other people's sorrows and troubles as her own. She was a true mother commander, masculine-looking, with a loud voice. On her feet, Mrs. Clara, she hadn't even changed, she was a flint. Daniel grinned to himself. "Oh, Baba Clara, great, not dead yet?" Cheerfully called the former neighbor. "Why should I die? The state owes me a pension for one more life. Granny Clara replied in a non-hospitable manner. "And whose are you, so cheerful? I don't recognize you. What are you doing, woman, Claga?" "I'm Daniel, your neighbor. Lucy's husband? That's how it is. He's here, so he's here in the dust." It was obvious that Granny Clara was not happy to see me. She frowned, looked at the city's handsome man. "Well, yes, here he is. How long can one travel abroad? We have to get on with our life in our native country." Daniel tried to make the conversation positive, but the old woman had been known for her iron temper before, and over the years she must have hardened even more. It was not easy to get her to be cordial. "You could have gone on traveling and not come here. You have nothing to show off, and what about Lucy and the baby?" "Huh?" The grandmother waved her hand and even spat in his direction. "You should go back to your foreign land. You must have lived well there. For so many years you have never visited your native son. Shameless." She went on her way, muttering curses and curses under her breath. No matter how Daniel had prepared himself for the various options for his return, he wasn't ready for this. It was not pleasant, of course. The very first one, that woman Clara, she ruined his mood. Daniel had never gotten along with her before. She'd always looked at him like a wolf, even when they'd been living badly with Lucy. Lucy never complained or whined. Daniel knew that for a fact. His wife was thin and weak-looking, but she had a lot of patience. I don't know why the old woman looked at him so unpleasantly. Yes, his homeland did not welcome him warmly. Daniel grunted and walked on, almost dragging his bag up the hill. The closer he got to his goal, the taller he grew, the more elastic his gait, and he carried his bag as if it were full of fluff. The man tried to look good. "Everything is fine with me, and my business is excellent, and my mood is good. You see, I'm in a great mood." His whole look screamed. The wide smile he had on his face looked like the mask of a happy man. The street he was walking down after years of absence appeared narrower, more unassuming than when he was a child. But through the front gardens, tall golden orbs and mallows were also going crazy. These unpretentious flowers were familiar attributes of his native village from childhood, and Daniel felt something stirring in his soul. The front garden of his native house had looked exactly the same when he went to school for the first time as a 7-year-old boy, and it was exactly the same bouquet of golden orbs that he had held in his skinny hands, shyly holding out to the beautiful and slender teacher. Is the teacher, whom the 13 first graders adored with all their hearts, still alive? They caught her every word, and at recess they tried to come as close as possible to her desk to breathe in the wonderful smell of her hair. They smelled of divine toilet soap. For the village kids who washed themselves gray and thrifty, once a week on Bath Saturday, that smell embodied both the distant city, from which Evelyn came after the Institute and their own future, unclear but beautiful, like the young teacher herself. Daniel remembered his first A's, of which he had been so proud, his mischievous friends. He had always strived to be one of the best, not in studies, but in sports. If he failed in sports, he had to win in dancing or checkers. Evelyn left, and so the studies became uninteresting. The gym teacher, who was in their school, got married and stopped coming on a motorcycle from the district center. Daniel abandoned sports, checkers, but in checkers he could still now beat a dozen good opponents. But what good would that do? As quickly as he lost interest in everything, he burned out as soon as he achieved a little success, and so it happened with Lucy. While he was courting her, he tried hard, he tried his best, but as well as he could, as it was customary in their area. Lucy was considered to be almost the first beauty, and to win her meant for Daniel to win another victory. He did, he tried. He walked with pleasure, remembering his younger years. He had lived well in his native village in his youth. What can I say? But then life did not go well, and Daniel was carried away somewhere, dreaming of a great future, temptations again. Here is the sister's house, platbins painted blue and white, in the front garden according to custom flowers order. Abigail's parents always lived well and were excellent hosts, so Abigail is in them too, a real homeowner. Or maybe she's been married for a long time. Maybe she has kids. Well, blood is not water. Daniel will put up with Daniel for a while, and her sister's husband, and their kids. What can you do? Your kin, it said. Daniel stood up straight and opened the gate. You live well. He smiled broadly at the young, full woman standing on the porch. Receive your guest, sister. Abigail greeted him with a look of surprise or incredulity. This was someone she hadn't expected to see on her doorstep, hadn't expected, and hadn't wanted. Not at all. What brings you here, Daniel? She gave him her hand reluctantly as he came over to hug her. What are you doing here? Well, so native places, you have to build a life, the years go by. Again he repeated, as if justifying his arrival, from somewhere taken, as if memorized phrase. But come in since you're here. Abigail did not look at him kindly either, but went forward, opening the door to the house for Daniel. The hut was as clean and bright as ever. Daniel remembered the comfort of Abigail's home. Everything was in good working order, nothing in need of repair, no ruin or helpless woman's hand. Daniel noticed that at once, with that familiar rustic look. There was a portrait of Abigail with a handsome, curly-haired man hanging on the wall next to his parents' pictures. Who's that? Your man? Unceremoniously, he pointed him out to Abigail. Handsome. Have you lived here long? Is he at work? We live as long as we have to. The sister replied dryly. He's on shift for a month at a time. Daniel was a little upset about her unknown husband, but she kept her spirits down. Abigail, but I'll stay with you for the first time. Because, you know, there's no telling. He waved his hand somewhere uncertain. And what are you thinking of going to Lucy? Abigail shook her hands in amazement. I don't know, Daniel, but I'll tell you straight. You were mean to them. I wouldn't go near a man like that if he'd done that to me. Indignation was written all over the woman's face. She even turned away to the window, neither to eat nor to drink tea. She did not offer her brother. You'll live a couple of days, so be it. And there, I'm not your friend, and I'm not an advisor, you know. What you've done, no one is allowed to do. And Abigail looked her brother straight in the face. Abigail, but why you? Why did I have to ruin my life? Daniel sighed. The last thing he needed was a lecture from Abigail. Abigail laughed. So you've fallen out of favor and decided to be a husband and father again. Well, I am a husband and father, and what's past is past. I'm not a boy anymore. I've seen life. I've seen different people. I've traveled. I understand the value of real life, Abigail. Daniel was getting hot. He had not expected to take his sister's reproaches so seriously. You can't change the past now, and I have big plans. I even have a lot of good plans. I hear that Lucy is doing very well. Abigail grinned as she listened to Daniel's outpourings and couldn't help herself. Is that why you came back? Is the kitty licking the butter? Yeah. Right. Lucy's doing very well now, and she's cured Mason, and she's got a new house, and she's got a lot of suitors. So I think you're gonna have to suck it up. You don't know how much Lucy loved me, do you? Kissing my feet on the ground to keep me going. Of course she believed you, simple as that. She got married. She was going to live well. She gave birth to a son for you, you fool. Abigail wiped her eyes, remembering vividly her own worries about Lucy and Mason. "Don't be so hard on me, sister," Daniel said peacefully. "I'll stay with you for a few days and look around. You'll see how happy she'll be when she finds out I've decided to go back to them." "Yeah, right?" Abigail was outraged. "You've been gone 10 years. What are you hoping for?" "Lucy, she's kind." Daniel smiled crookedly, convincing himself first. "She'll be glad to see me. You're a fool to be happy with you." Abigail cut him off. "You're mean, Daniel, really mean. No matter how you justify yourself, you're not a man. We'll figure it out." Daniel protested. "I was not the last man there either. I worked at the construction site. Do you know how I worked? Ask anyone. I worked hard. No one had Abigail to ask about him, and there was no reason to. She knew perfectly well who she was dealing with, lying and deceiving himself as always. He seemed to talk himself into believing his own words. He protested and went back to persuading himself. You're Abigail. Remember, I'm a handyman. I can do anything if I want to. The main thing is to set a goal. If I have a goal, I'll achieve it. That's just the way I am." Daniel looked at his little sister and tried not to notice her judgmental, purely womanly, a little pitying look, and it was unclear whether Abigail actually felt a little sorry for him, or whether she was sorry that he was really her relative, a third cousin, a brother. And he again pretended to himself that he had not heard, but he had. He didn't believe his stupid sister. What did she know about people? People like him, purposeful, seeking, and what was his opinion? His sister sat him down at the table, cut lard, warmed soup, brought a table full of herbs from the garden. Daniel enjoyed plump cucumbers only from the bed, tomatoes cracking from their own juice, crisp onion stalks, and praised his sister. "Well, Abigail, you're just like your mother." Aunt Nina was a famous vegetable gardener all her life. It was not for nothing that she worked in vegetable growing on the farm for so many years. Even my mom didn't have such tomatoes, even though Aunt Nina used to grow them. What a hostess you are! Abigail, indifferent to flattery, sat sadly. Her face never brightened. "Don't they feed you like this in the cities?" She did not lower her mocking tone. "When I left, I had never eaten such lard and pickles. Shoeing," Daniel said nonchalantly. "My native land, it's yielding." Little by little my sister thawed. "Daniel, you haven't found happiness in distant lands." She sighed contentedly. "Lucy, your Lucy, she left too. Yes, she didn't settle down either." "How did she leave?" "Where?" Daniel choked and stared at Abigail, froze with a cucumber in one hand and a spoon in the other. "Chew on that, or you'll choke on it." Abigail looked at him with annoyance. She came back later. "There were all sorts of rumors, but nobody knows anything. You drove off with your tail between your legs, but Lucy was as if her soul had been taken out of her. She never left the house, never talked to anyone. She lived in lockdown, then she moved away. For 5 years we didn't hear a word about her. We'd already forgotten her. But she came back. She came back 5 years later to your house and immediately started to build a new house on the plot." Daniel was silent, sitting there with a cucumber in his hand. "A new house?" he only asked in astonishment. "That's it. She lives with Mason in the old one, and next to it she builds a big one, just like a palace. You can admire it. She hired builders from somewhere far away, not local. Ours would at least know something, but these swarthy ones don't even speak our language. Moldavians? They live right there, at Lucy's, in the anteroom. Is it really true that nobody knows anything?" Daniel asked. "No. People went crazy at first. Where were you all this time?" Where did the money come from? How did you get it together? They tried to ask questions, but they wouldn't say anything. How is she? Doesn't she go out for bread? What does she feed the workers? She rarely goes to the local stores. She goes to the city. Despite her model-like appearance, Lucy was a quiet and modest girl. All the girls in the village were big, tall, and overweight, blood and milk. Noisy, vocal local girls could hurt the unwanted groom with a strong word and stand up for themselves, and if necessary, to scoff and hard to get their own way. Among them and the newcomer was like a sparrow in a flock of crows, small and not loud. Daniel wanted just such a bride, and it was not hard to choose. She was the only one to whom his heart lay. What do you see in that pale marshmallow? Mother grumbled. She can't milk a cow. She can't draw water. She's a weak girl. She's of no use in the farm. There's Doris. She has tits like a dairy cow and strength like a man. My father is in charge of the grain mill. That's why the house is full. If it's built that way, my brother is a forester. I'd marry her. I wouldn't be in trouble. But that girl, Why do I need Doris, Mom? Daniel laughed. We already have cows. I don't have to milk her. I need a wife, so I won't be ashamed to take her out. Not a horse. I'm not going to ride it. I'm going to live. How are you going to live? With a city fashionista. She probably can't even melt a stove. She's got one too. Daniel didn't listen to his mother. He liked Lucy, and her gait was smooth. He looked at her 100 times when she walked past their house from the library, and gray eyes, so big that you can drown, also looked, what a sin to say. But Lucy herself went away quickly. You can't talk to her. You can't hug her like your girls. She was very strict, but he liked that she didn't let anyone near her. One look as if threw the guys away. If anyone dared to laugh, to press in a joke in a corner of the club, hapless suitors were embarrassed and withdrew quickly, until friends did not notice the failure and did not ridicule. Daniel had been looking for an approach to Lucy for a long time. He went to the library as if he were on duty. He flipped through a lot of magazines at a long table, tried to talk, but only the girl answered in one word, short and clear. Daniel gradually got used to the printed word, just not a fool, studied not worse than everyone else. He was also well regarded at school, and he turned out to be a good electrician. Again, not dirty work, not near cattle, for example. He wore clean clothes, was proud of his specialty. In any place people like him are needed. He used to read, and Lucy used to give him books. And you, Daniel, have you read about Mcluco McClay? You're always looking at travel magazines. Maybe you'd like it? And she held out The Man from the Moon. I read it. We discussed the book. From that book, their friendship began. You to me, Lucy, beautiful, more similar find a book? He asked, smiling. You have a talent for librarianship. Immediately see into the root, understand who is interested in what, and continued to shower the girl with compliments. I must say, his praise was heartfelt. He really saw in Lucy only good, and Lucy, bookish soul, finally saw in him, as it seemed to her, an interesting interlocutor with whom you can talk. At first, as usual, the conversations revolved around the books they had read, and Daniel was sly, trying his best not to give away his uneducated nature, not giving the impression that he was hearing about many things for the first time. More on that later. What only they did not talk about, fall and winter evenings, in an empty reading room. To tell the truth, this library was not such a popular and crowded place. Gone were the days when half of the reading room was occupied by young guys who were happy to sit at newspapers and magazines until the start of the movie. Regular readers, really keen book lovers, went in the afternoon. Children from school were also brought in during school hours or right after school, and then the quiet hall was filled with children's hum. Printed editions on the tables were scattered in all directions, under the children's quick hands. Children would come in whole classes, talking and laughing, and on such occasions Daniel would leave at once to return in the evening when Lucy had finished her work and was going home. It was especially good for Daniel to be here in bad weather. There were no people, no one walking in the rain or blizzard to the library. Outside the window of blizzard or rustling rain, you could hear someone slapping on the puddles, and the library was warm, the radiators crackling cozily, and he and Lucy just the two of them. He was enjoying himself and sinfully proud. The prettiest girl in their village, there she was right next to him. If you wanted to, you could take her hand, stroke her blonde hair, and most importantly, you could stare at her as long as you wanted and admire the major movements of her hands, watch her speak, watch her lips part in a smile. About the big gray eyes, he would have liked to write poems, but only could not. He felt it all deeply, as it seemed to him, in his heart, but he could not tell about it, even if he died. "Lucy, let's go to the movies. They brought a good movie today," he said once he made up his mind. I must say, while they were talking about books, Daniel could still explain himself, but when it became clear that it was necessary to somehow move forward in the relationship, again confused. "Let's go," Lucy agreed unexpectedly quickly. "I saw the poster. I really wanted to see it. I'll come closer to the beginning and we'll go together." The guy was happy. After that, he was already considered a legitimate escort according to village customs, and Lucy did not recognize anyone except Daniel and did not want to recognize him. She had already, as it turned out, become imperceptibly accustomed to him. "You guy, you're getting there." His mother scolded him angrily at home. "Look, you'll be tormented with her. You'll do everything yourself, mark my word. Then don't take offense at me. I warned you, we need a strong woman to take care of the house, not this doll with books. Mom, stop your whining." Daniel snapped languidly. "I'll get married anyway, you know me." They continued such angry quarrels until spring. Finally, at one opportune moment, Daniel made up his mind and asked Lucy, "Why don't you introduce me to your parents? You know all my parents, you know all the people in the village, and you have already recognized me." "What parents, Daniel?" Lucy was surprised. "I'm from the orphanage. I have no one in the world, no relatives, no one. I can only introduce you to the director of the orphanage. She is a wonderful woman. She was like a mother to us. I always write her letters." Deep down, Daniel was even happy. Lucky, God forbid. No one would prevent them from living as they wanted. No one would interfere in their lives. No one would command them. He had had enough of his own mother. She teaches and teaches, she's exhausted. Mother surprisingly calmly perceived his decision to marry when she learned that the future daughter-in-law round orphan. "It's for the best," she said. "Ours will be ours our way, and she'll live her life." But Daniel immediately declared, "Well, no, we will live separately. With you will not boil the porridge. You with your moralizing will not give us peace. So, sorry. Goodbye. We'll come and help you. Just call us. But old and young should not live in the same house." "Wow, you raised a son," the mother wailed. "Why are we throwing you out on the street?" From time immemorial, a bride was brought to her mother and father's house. "I've made an agreement with the chairman. There's an empty house near the board. Remember? They'll give it to us for the first time, and we'll buy it back from the village. Well, It's a nice house. Mother has accepted it. Don't forget your mother. Do you hear me, son? Heaven in a shellash, and their shellash was good, in the center of the village, even to run to his mother, to fix the fence or wipe the floors. The library is close. The young lived for 3 years without grief and worries. They seemed to live amicably. There were no reasons for quarrels. What else? Unless they had a baby to complete their happiness. And that was the stumbling block. Lucy got pregnant. She walked with shining eyes and quietly rejoiced at the upcoming happiness. But it turned out that Daniel did not dream of a child at all. Come on, Lucy, let's live for ourselves. Why do we need a baby now? We're still young. What are you doing? Lucy was amazed. What do you mean? Why have a baby? It's the most important thing in life. It's the most important thing in life. Yes, you'll have time to give birth 100 more times. Her husband is boiling. Now he's going to tie you up. Let's make a deal. You can go to the abortion. 5 minutes and you're free. Can you believe it? No, no way. Lucy cut me off. I've never had a family. I want a complete family so that my son or daughter has a father and a mother, a grandmother, relatives to be. Unknown heredity, childhood in an orphanage, it's all taken its toll, of course. And she was so depressed for the whole 9 months she carried the baby. Lucy was having a hard time. The pregnancy was complicated. Lucy was hospitalized several times. Daniel became depressed. The usual way of life threatened to be disrupted. Instead of a measured, comfortable life in his own pleasure, he would have to listen to the crying of the baby all night, to do something for him, and Lucy would not be his at all. Already now, just on the threshold of the troubles, he suffered so much that no one will not show a little. He's not groomed, not fed. My wife used to hang his ironed underwear on a chair after the bath, down to his t-shirt and socks, and now he washed on Saturday in his mother's bathroom, so he could hardly find the right clothes in the closet. I couldn't find socks, so I had to wash the dirty ones myself and wait for them to dry. Of course, I went to my mother's house for lunch, not with different Mirandas, as Lucy spoiled him, but still home food, normal. He grew up on it, and nothing happened to him. But he wanted beautiful, healthy dishes for his stomach. Daniel was used to variety, but his mother's old woman had a menu. Soup and potatoes in 3 kinds, fried, boiled, and baked. He would have slept at his mother's, but she talked too much. Daniel was getting tired of the boredom of old age, as he called it. The house was boring, uncomfortable. There was no one to talk to. The floors were dirty. There was dust on the tables and shelves. The mistress had been in the maternity hospital for 2 weeks. Finally, gradually, he got used to the fact that he now had a son, but he could not love the boy. Strange thing is that Daniel had once loved Lucy, as he himself thought, for real. He wanted to be always with her, admired her beauty, even took care of his wife as he could, bought gifts, for example. Lucy, with special love, put on a pink silk dress, which he brought her from the city. She remembered that summer day at the beginning of their life together. "Look what I ripped off for you at the department store." He shouted to his wife, who looked out the window, when he rode up to the house with a friend on a motorcycle. Even though I was on a business trip, I didn't forget about my beautiful wife. 100 women were looking at this dress, arguing, but I got it. And right on the street unfolded this dress of unprecedented beauty. Lucy just aghast and hugged her Daniel. He took care of the housing, and at first he arranged everything in the house. It is impossible to say that he was a bum or a drunkard. In the village he was considered a smart and not at all lazy electrician, and he often came to his mother's house to fix the roof or the fence. And when Mason was born, something changed in Daniel. Jealousy of his own son overpowered his love for his wife. It is true that Daniel was not particularly warm-hearted before. He had no friendship with anyone. He only told his wife that he was with friends. In fact, he was so busy with himself that he had no interest or time for others. Lucy noticed a motherly, unkind attitude towards people. He saw faults first of all, and then she saw her son. He was lying apart from the perfectly intact booths, where the frightened but seemingly healthy children were sitting. It was later learned that they were only slightly bruised. Only Mason was injured. He was taller than the other kids, and although the merry-go-round had not even had time to gain height and spin up, just started to rise, the boy flew out of the cabin, unable to hold on to the handrails. He was lying on the lawn a little farther away, with his eyes closed and no sign of life. Son Mason! Lucy rushed to the child, about to take him in her arms, but was stopped by the attendant. "Don't touch it. Don't touch it. The doctor will come now. It's dangerous to lift him." Lucy understood nothing and stroked her son's cheek in horror. By the veins in his neck, she realized that the boy was alive, while he was still alive. An ambulance pulled up. Lucy and Mason were taken to the hospital. Daniel, who approached, only had time to see Lucy get in with her son, and the car door slammed shut. Lucy, whose thoughts were occupied only with her son, did not think to wait or look for her husband. Time was golden. What happened here? Daniel rushed to the employees of the ride. "My son's in there. What's wrong with him? And my wife's in the ambulance. I saw her." "Calm down. He's alive." They were trying to calm him down. He let go of his hands and fell. "Your wife is unharmed. She went to the hospital with him." Once again, Daniel was alone. Mason regained consciousness, but his spine was damaged, and the boy could not get up or walk. Lucy was constantly with her son in the hospital. Daniel worked. The expenses were enormous. Lucy, completely dried up from worry, in one of the short visits home asked him, "Daniel, you'd better try to live more economically. We're going to need a lot of money. Reconstructive surgeries are expensive. Is there any hope that he will recover?" Daniel asked. "Maybe we're just kidding ourselves. The doctors are giving us a chance." It was obvious that Lucy herself had little faith in this, but she continued to fight for her son. Daniel tried. Money never hurts. He understood that well. He didn't like going to the hospital. He said he was tired at work. Lucy felt sorry for him. She was with the boy, let her husband rest. To look at the crippled child, the father could not and did not want. His estrangement from his son deepened. Again an empty house, again loneliness. He was tired, exhausted. There was no desire to go to his mother, tired of her grouchiness. The young man wanted warmth and comfort, a woman's care. When will it end? He was indignant when Lucy once again came to check the house and put in order, wash his clothes. "Well, I'm not at the resort." The wife was offended. "Do you want to go to the hospital, and I'll go to work?" She knew perfectly well that this would never happen, that Daniel looked like a fool. To lose the only thing he had left, his freedom. No, he couldn't empathize with his bedridden child of 3 years. In that time, Daniel had acquired a convenient mistress. Miranda worked as a clerk at a bakery in a neighboring town, and a couple of times Daniel had stopped by the bakery for a snack and encountered her feminine, greedy gaze. He felt he had nothing to reproach himself for. God knows he tried. For 3 whole years he had endured loneliness, lack of comfort. Almost always alone without his wife, no one could stand it. How many times? He just turned 30, the age when you want to live. Now at every opportunity he went to Miranda, who always waited for him with a table set and pastels undone. And at home there's only work, money going to doctors and drugstores, a tired aging wife and a crippled son. More than once and more than twice, he tried to explain to Lucy that all this treatment is completely useless. Lucy, you understand, finally, if at once they could not do anything, then now you certainly will not be able to. Why are you wasting money? What are you saying, Daniel? He's our son. You have to grab every opportunity, you understand. Lucy was almost screaming. She, too, was on the verge, desperate. She came home from the hospital, hoping to get advice and support from her husband, but he looked indifferently away and mumbled, "I understand, but I don't understand why I have to work from morning till night, and I can't even buy new pants." Lucy was slightly taken aback. What is he talking about? She opened her closet and began to lay out a pile of his clothes in front of her husband. "Do you have nothing to wear? Aren't you afraid of God? I'm going to throw out all this old stuff." Daniel shouted, his nerves strained to the limit. "Are we a family or an infirmary? Am I married or not, after all? When are we going to have a normal life? We'll never live normally because you don't love your son." Shouted in his face Lucy, "You only care about yourself." The woman's heart had long ago cooled to this man, but by inertia, she continued to consider him a husband and bestowed all the signs of respect. What is there? She served him even now, when there was no longer any strength left. And when Daniel went to town a couple of days later, she was not surprised. "I'm going to visit my folks for a week," he said. "At least I'll get some rest." Lucy did not understand his action, but did not dissuade him from going. Something about her unknown kin flashed in her head, but she did not even pay attention to such trifles. What did they mean compared to what she and Mason were about to face? Daniel had already arrived at his perky barmaid's house in anticipation of the festivities. "Daniel," she cooed, "I finally have you. How long have I waited for you?" "Well, I'm not letting you go now." "Yeah, you won't." Daniel laughed, pleased with the warm welcome. "I'm a free bird. I love freedom. You can't bait me." "We'll see about that." Miranda purred, taking off his shirt and kissing him. "Maybe I will, or maybe you'll want to stay with me forever." "Oh, Miranda, you're a hot woman," Daniel whispered between kisses. "Do you want to deprive me of my last strength?" After a long lovemaking, supported by food and alcohol from the famous buffet, the luggers lazily discussed the situation. "Leave them alone," pulled Miranda. "The child is an invalid. They used to put such children in an orphanage, and your clutch will never be young and beautiful, Daniel. What do you need her for? Look at me." She stood up on the bed, stretched her bare arms toward him, stroked her thighs and looked languidly at him, urging him to appreciate her feminine virtues. Wow, how appetizing. Daniel laughed and drew her back into bed. Everything he was used to was here, everything he needed for a comfortable existence. Daniel was leaning more and more towards the option that Miranda had suggested. "Okay, Miranda, I'll go there. I'll settle some things, and I'll be with you forever." "Oh, Daniel," Miranda shrieked and hugged him with renewed vigor. "How wonderful! You and I will go to a faraway place where no one will bother us." 2 weeks later, Daniel returned home. How miserable it seemed to him now, their home together with Lucy. He looked around. Nothing was dear to him. Nothing was nice. Of course, they had already paid the full amount for the house, along with his wife. So Daniel reasoned that he would leave the house to Mason and Lucy, and he owed them nothing more. That's it, he said to himself firmly. That's it. He'd been going to Miranda's house for a year, no children, no relatives, a nice place to live. Why shouldn't he live there? She's dusting him off, and then we'll see if Miranda's right. They should go to some big construction site. They're not hard workers, of course, but they want the money. Daniel prepared for the conversation carefully. He waited until Lucy and her son went to the hospital for another doctor's appointment. He went through his belongings and carefully put them in his bag. He also counted the money that Lucy had collected for her son's treatment and carefully put it in his pocket. After all, he was the one who earned it, so what should he do? To show up empty-handed at Miranda's as if he were a pauper and a beggar. He had everything ready when Lucy and Mason came back. Lucy looked at the suitcases right away. "Are you going somewhere? You just got here." "Yeah, Lucy, I'm leaving." Lucy was confused. "What do you mean you're leaving?" "Where?" "I'm leaving you completely." Daniel even turned away, as if he was afraid to look in her direction. "But I'm not alone. We have a family, a son." His wife looked perplexed, still not believing what was happening. "I can't live like this anymore. How long can I live like this?" Daniel atomized himself. I work, but no use." "What do you mean, no use?" "We have a house, a household, here Mason healed. All the money I earn goes into a hole. No rest, no distractions, just work and hospitals. This is not the life I signed up for." Daniel began to grab the suitcases with shaking hands. He himself had not expected the farewell to be so difficult. Lucy, at last, began to realize that his scheme was quite serious. Looking at the suitcases at her feet, she said in a trembling voice, "And don't you feel sorry for your son?" Son, you've been with him since birth. But did it help him? All his life you pampered him, wiped his snot, and what happened?" Again Daniel remembered what was so unpleasant to him, to make it easier to leave. "You were there for him then. Why didn't you save him? Why didn't you save him when he fell? Because of you, he became an invalid, a crippled son. Lucy couldn't take it anymore. How can you say that about your child? You two went to drink beer." "No, to be near us then. How can you?" She finally burst into tears, which had been in her eyes since the beginning of the conversation. "I'm telling the truth. I pampered him, so he sits all day long. He'd be back on his feet by now if you hadn't dragged him to hospitals. There's no life. You say family. What kind of family are we? You're always going to doctors, and I'm alone. You work like hell, and you don't even have hot soup at home, let alone a family. How will we be without you, Daniel?" Wailed Lucy, who could not understand her feelings and only cried. "Will you go to work, Hal? Stop driving him back and forth. You can't get new legs. He'll sit alone. He's not a little boy." Finally, Daniel gave out all the things that had been driving him crazy for years. It was as if a long-standing boil had burst. "How could it be, Daniel?" Lucy asked through her tears. "The doctor said today that in 3 months we will be admitted to a clinic in the capital. This is already a 100% guarantee that the treatment will help. They work miracles there. It's the same story again. Lucy, how can you not get tired of believing these charlatans? I've been working for years for their money." "Enough. But we've waited so long for this, it's only a matter of time before Mason gets back on its feet. You'll see." "No, I've had enough." Daniel firmly threw away his wife's hands that were reaching for him. "Daniel, for God's sake, don't leave us in our hour of need. I won't say a word later. I won't reproach you. But help us now. It's only 3 months." Lucy sobbed and threw herself on her knees at his feet. He only looked down at her squeamishly. "Don't make a scene, Lucy. You're not the first. You're not the last. You'll have an even easier time without me, lonely one." And he let out a hoarse laugh. "How many times can you believe this nonsense?" The exhausted wife continued to cry, sprawled on the floor near his feet. There was the familiar squeak of wheels on the uneven boardwalk, and out of the corner of his eye Daniel saw Mason pull up in a wheelchair. "Mom, don't. Let him go." Daniel yanked his leg out of Lucy's hands and stepped toward the threshold, stopping. "I took the money there. I was the one earning it. That's why I took it. I have to start somewhere too. I'm leaving you the house." He stood there for a while, thought about it, decided to make a final threat. "Don't file for alimony, or I'll sue you for half the house." Lucy sobbed with more despair, and he hurried out. I didn't want to hear her make a monster out of him. As I was closing the door, I turned around and met my eyes with my son. It wasn't a child's look. It was a look of disgust and hatred, a look that made Daniel uncomfortable. For the next 10 years, wandering through other people's apartments, lounging in other people's beds, he remembered Mason's deep eyes. All the happy moments of his life were poisoned by that look. Daniel returned in Abigail's downy feather beds. He was stuffy and heavy. Oh, life! He longed to return to his native village. He thought he'd finally find peace and serenity. But what happened? While I was remembering, I got so excited that I couldn't sleep at once. Lucy was alone with her troubles. There was only enough money in her purse for one trip to the store. Her mother-in-law, a complete stranger, had never helped her and Daniel's family in anything. She only taught them and demanded help from her son. Lucy recalled how on her grandson's birthday, the old woman sat at the table with tight lips. She ate the food with her daughter-in-law's pleasure, but never once praised the treats. As a gift to her grandson, she brought a 100-year-old yellowed piece of cloth. That's what kind of material used to be. It's unbelievable. 10 years in the trunk, and as if it was bought yesterday. On Lucy, you can make a shirt for your little boy. And with a proud look she gave the gift. Lucy couldn't remember any other gifts from her mother-in-law. Now that Daniel had left her and Mason to fend for themselves, the old woman was beginning to slander her daughter-in-law. What could she expect from an orphan? She's a promiscuous girl. She was like that when she was young, and they probably kicked her out of town to the country. Who would want her in town? "Come on, you're lying," said the kind-hearted neighbor. She was a clever girl, beautiful, until they got into trouble. And your son left her with an invalid child. And he's an invalid because of his mother. How come? How do we know what she did to him? Maybe she's pregnant. What'd she do to keep from giving birth? Maybe he's not Daniel Mason. "Oh, I think you're a witch, Betty," the neighbor used to say in her heart. "You've been like that all your life, and you've gone completely mad in your old age. You are slandering your daughter-in-law, but she's a hard worker, Modest, and what a vegetable garden she has. Look, cleanliness and order everywhere. What order is there?" It was only Daniel who kept everything in order. The old woman was bent. "Why don't you tell me how she used to come to your house and scrape out all the dirt? All the years she cleaned your house silly, she wanted to please you." "I don't have a mother of my own," says Aunt Molly. "It's not hard for me to help Mother Daniel. She's ill. But you're shameless, sitting there gossiping. Aren't you afraid of God? Betty has quarreled with her friends and is alone. Her daughter-in-law is now her first enemy. Her grandson doesn't go, and her favorite only son, the beauty and pride of his mother, has left. And that's it." The old woman became ill often, and then she collapsed. Lucy, no matter how kind her heart was, could not take care of her mother-in-law. She was left completely without means of subsistence, what to speak of the treatment of her son. Day and night, exhausted woman's brain was looking for a way out. What to do? How to earn at least a living? While it was summer, She and Mason saved the vegetable garden, lost weight, but did not starve. Lucy, can't you go to your place? Asked her Grandma Clara, worried about her neighbor. No way, Mrs. Claga. Who's going to let me? I don't even have sick leave. They can't keep me on sick leave for years. There's a good woman working there too. She has a family to feed too. So she probably has all the healthy foreheads in her family. Granny was angry. And she has a husband. And you're all alone. I'd sit with Mason while I'm still crawling, thank God. No, a library education wouldn't help, and it would be impossible to leave my son at home and sit in a half-empty library all day. Baba Clara, of course, is a human being, but you should see how hard she carries her soul disfigured by hard work. She has blood pressure, a bunch of other illnesses, and what kind of salary is a librarian? There's no more work in the village, a school and a nurse's station, neither of which suits her, and there are no vacancies. She can't go to the collective farm. The collective farm has ceased to exist. The world has changed. Life has become much more complicated over the years. Lucy is still only 28, and she feels like an old woman with only one joy, her son. He's growing up smart, reading, drawing. How much has he suffered in the hospital? But he hasn't lost his kindness. Soon it will be too small for him. Mom, why are you so sad? No, son, I'm fine. I'm just thinking. About what? I'm thinking about how we're going to live our lives. Mom, you'll figure it out. You're the smart one. And he reaches for his mother to hug and kiss him. Oh my God! Lucy prayed at night. Lord, show me the way to cure my son, to get him back on his feet. Help me, Lord. I'll do anything. I'll bear anything. Just give me a chance. Open the door for me. Blessed is he who believes. On a clear August afternoon, into the hands of Lucy, desperate to the last degree, the letter carrier handed a letter. From Margaret. Lucy gasped. Mommy, who is Margaret? Asked Mason. Oh, Mason, this is my very, very soulful friend. An orphan? Mason loved his mother's stories about her childhood. Yes, from an orphanage. Lucy hastily opened the letter and began to read. My dear friend, Margaret wrote, I'm writing to you from far away. How did I get here? It's a long story. I've been here for 3 years. I came for the money, but I think I'll stay here. You and I always dreamed of having a house, a bunch of kids, a family. So I decided to make that dream come true, to earn money to buy my own house. I didn't get an education. I knew I'd have to work wherever he put me. I was ready for anything, but I didn't think money would be so hard to come by. Yeah, the pay's pretty good here. If you live frugally, you can easily buy a house in this time. But I don't want a house anymore, Lucy. I don't want anything because I'm never going to have a bunch of kids or a family. I met a nice guy, local. We got close. We were going to get married. He worked as a foreman for loggers, and loggers here are mostly ex-convicts. It's a remote area, you know. They respected my Eric. I won't say anything bad about the laborers, but once 2 of them got drunk and started fighting, pulling out knives. Mine doesn't tolerate such things. At the workplace in the middle of the taiga, it's not allowed. So he went to break them up, even though they were angry mad. They didn't mean to. I believe they meant no harm. Yes, but one of them, in a fever, went right through my Eric's neck. How can you save him? I was pregnant at the time. Trouble doesn't come alone. I turned black with grief. I lost my little girl. The doctor said no more children. There's no reason for me to go to the big land now. Here at least I can visit Eric's grave, but there I have nothing. Lucy, my dear friend, You're all I have left. If you had only come to visit, I would have showered you with flowers, my friend." Lucy read the letter and tears rolled down her face. She remembered the sweet smile of Margaret, the redhead, her laughter. She remembered her parents who had died in a car accident. For Lucy, she became a guide to the life beyond the gates. After all, Lucy herself knew nothing about normal families. Margaret recalled, Lucy felt with her a part of life before. Before the accident, before the orphanage, before she taught Lucy to dream, together they made plans. Margaret's future was determined when a gymnastics coach noticed her. The training camps and practices began. She was prophesied a good sports future, but a minor injury prevented her from continuing gymnastics. It happens, one little thing changes the whole fate. It happened after the girls graduated from the orphanage. Margaret had to go to the factory because it had a dormitory. She regretfully said goodbye to her sports career. Lucy, by that time, had already finished her studies at the local library technical school, and after that she was sent to the village. In the beginning their correspondence was lively, then went everyday life, cares, and troubles. In difficult moments, Lucy always turned to her friend, of course, in her thoughts. And strangely enough, it helped her. She pictured Margaret's freckled face and asked her advice. The answer always came. And here was a letter from the only person Lucy could call a family member, a friend, a sister who would never let her down. A crazy thought arose in her head and began to take real shape, a plan for the future. All night long she had been putting everything in its place. In the morning, despite the sleepless night, Lucy got up cheerful and determined. The task ahead was even more difficult. It required an effort that even she had never had to make before. "Baba Clara, give me some advice," said she to a neighbor who had dropped in to visit Mason's pet, out of habit. Looking at her pale face, the neighbor realized that the matter was serious. Mason was sent to the yard to play with the kittens. There was nothing to burden the child with unnecessary talk. "Oh, you poor thing," sighed the old woman, having heard Lucy's account. "I would with great joy left my dove, my Mason, but how? We'll have to live apart. You and Sodes will not allow that you." Lucy looked at her grandmother with regret. "It's not easy, you need a lot of documents from them." "I'll give you money for the trip, Lucy, I will. I'll have money for the funeral, but I don't need it. Maybe I'll live to see you again. My parents were long-lived," smiled Baba Slaga. "I'll see you, Baba Slaga, I promise you. I'll pay you back the money from the first paycheck." She hugged her old friend and cried. "Why are you crying? You should be happy," grumbled the old woman. "You have such hope. That's what hope is. He will put you to work, support you for the first time, and Mason, suddenly, it will be good there with the doctors." At these words, Grandma Clara did not notice how she took out a huge handkerchief to hide her tears. She began to blow her nose noisily. Now the hardest thing is to explain to the child what and how. "Oh, it won't be easy, Lucy." "I don't know how it will be solved, Baba Clara." Lucy sighed. "It's all right. He's a boy, a sensible man, a kind soul like yours, and there's no one between you. You're the closest people to each other. You'll understand each other." "And what about the house, Baba Clara?" Lucy asked. "It's not good for it to be empty. It's not good to sell it either. My son, it should not remain homeless, and I will not have time before the frost. And you, Lucy." Clara's on a roll. "You go to the school principal first, and also to Benjamin, our former chairman. They are experienced people. They will help you. Every year some of the young people come to the village to work, and they'll settle them in your house. It's warm and the place is good." "That would be very good, Mrs. Clara." I don't need money, just as long as the house is reviewed." And so it was agreed. The conversation with the son was difficult, but Mason accepted his mother's decision surprisingly calmly. "Mason, do you want to walk like before?" Mom asked. "I do." Her son looked her straight in the eye. "But we cannot go to the treatment. We have no money. Would you agree to wait until I earn money to live without me?" "At Granny Clara's?" Mason smiled. "No, honey. Granny Slogga wouldn't be allowed to take you. And she's not in good health. She can't take you to the hospital to town. She can't." Mason sighed. "What if you stay at the boarding school where there are doctors? With the same kids for a while I earn money. There's tutors, different clubs, schools there too." "Like in your orphanage?" Mason raised his eyes to his mother. "Like in my orphanage." Lucy nodded her head. "And you'll make friends there." Mason spent almost 3 years in a center for children like him while his mother worked up north. Just as Lucy had been told earlier by the social worker, the internet was very good indeed. The social worker, an elderly woman, had been offering her the place for a long time. Realizing how hard it is for a single woman with a disabled child, "You made the right decision, Lucy," she reassured her. "There is a very good team of teachers. Doctors are attached to sick children." "How long will it take to collect the documents?" Lucy was worried about something else. No. This procedure has been worked out for a long time. You can't imagine how many parents of disabled children find themselves in a difficult life situation. That's why we process everything according to the data we have. The registration of Mason was quick. And now they are already saying goodbye at the door of the local school, as the boarding school was called in the city. "I'll sing you a song every night, just like at home, do you hear, Mason? Wherever I am. Now I'll get in a wagon and go far away. I'll go a long, long way. But every night when you go to bed, I'll sing for you. You listen and you'll hear it. And when will you come, Mama?" Mason tried very hard not to cry. "Son, I'll write to you every week." "How much more money do you need to start walking?" "As soon as I get the money I need, I'll come right over." Two hearts were torn apart. How do I get to her? How long is the train? How to dress so as not to get into trouble at this time of year? About all these things, Margaret wrote in her letter. Lucy didn't even bother to reply to her friend. Instead, she only sped up her actions. And so she was on her way to the unknown, for the first time in her life to a faraway place. Margaret could not meet her, unaware of her friend's decision. Lucy herself had to settle down in a gray town surrounded by mighty taiga bounties, the best earnings we have at the logging operations. Her traveling companion cheerfully told her, happily eating fried fish bought at the station. "The work is hard, but don't go to the librarians. It's the same petty pay as in the big land, not even enough for clothes. I don't even have clothes that fit." Lucy was afraid. The woman laughed. "Fool, so there in overalls and tools, all issued. Yes, such overalls that nowhere else you will not find such warm good." A good-natured compartment neighbor explained a lot of things to the inexperienced girl, saying goodbye fussed. "And you remembered my address, or what if you can't find your friend, where to at night?" "Look, that's where I live. If you ask for my name and surname, anyone will show you." And she showed me the street leading away from the station. And Lucy had to look for a new acquaintance in the dark night. While she was waiting for the bosses, while she was being registered for work, for the unknown position of a lopper, it got dark. "What dormitory?" The boss, a fat man of imposing proportions, was surprised. "We only have a tent city here. Don't you see there are almost no real houses? You can count them on your fingers, but in the forest, yes, there is comfort. You'll live in a cozy wagon there, young lady. Let's get your overalls in the morning, and then we'll take a lumber truck to the place. Yes, don't worry, people live here too, not wolves. And he laughed loudly at his joke. Lucy returned back to the station, from where she went down the street indicated, to the place where there were real, according to the cheerful chief houses. The guest was received cheerfully, fed, put to bed. In the morning, sitting in the high cabin of the car, Lucy gazed into the faintly lightening distance. She was not a coward, but she did not feel heroic. Only ashamedly thought that yesterday she had missed the evening treatment. Before going to bed, closing her eyes, she had sung a song to her son to herself, but fatigue had plunged her into sleep earlier. So not without the help of new friends, Lucy began to work in the taiga. In her naivety, she thought to see her friend here on the first day. If only she knew how many 1,000 people were cutting wood and chopping off limbs, stacking huge logs on more loads. So far spread the lands of this timber farm that Margaret, she met only thanks to the word-of-mouth radio, through many fellow travelers, sending her greetings. All the more joyful was their meeting. "Come on, Lucy, I'll talk to you, so that you can be transferred to us," Margaret said. "Everyone knows me. I'll talk Charles into it." Charles was the name of the bulky boss who'd hired Lucy. "He'll fight, of course." Margaret smiled. "He'll say, 'You can drop your lady stuff,' but he can also transfer, he's Sutton, and Lucy is already used to her brigade." "No, Margaret," she answered. "My take care of me, do not laugh at me, patiently teach me everything, as I am now from them at once, only to a friend under the wing got. I'll stay at my place. Now we'll be near each other, I'll see you." The work was hard. The day was like another day. My hands fell off by evening. The frost dried my cheeks and tore my lungs. In summer, mosquitoes and nuss, the heavy, hot cedar spirit. People tried to take fewer days off so that they could work and go to the land sooner. Someone strived to earn money and chased the intended amount, but only few people succeeded. In 3 years of hard labor, Lucy had aged 10 years. Every once in a while, she looked in the mirror and was horrified. Would Mason recognize me? She wrote to him every week, received cute drawings, then letters from her son. In spite of her age and ailments, Grandma Clara visited her favorite boy at the boarding school several times. There was a bus to the city. That comforted Lucy a little. "I owe my whole life to Baba Slaga," she told her new colleagues. Especially she became close to an elderly woman, Camille, who arrived in place of the cook who had gone home. It would be more accurate to say that the old woman was very insistently asked to work. She had long been retired, agreed only out of respect for the past merits of the boss, if humanity can be considered a merit. She agreed, Camille, to replace the cook who had left for a while until someone new arrived. Her health had been compromised by years of living in these parts and hard work. Since she and Lucy lived in the same trailer, there was no end to their conversations. Camille was attractive in her modesty and simplicity and could give good advice. She had lived in this area for many years. "How did you get here, Camille?" It was a question that excited Lucy very much. "I was a romantic girl," she told Lucy. "A gymnasium girl of the type who fell in love with a man to death, and he went to prison. He did time, and after his sentence, he was exiled here." "What did he put you in prison for?" Lucy asked. "Surely you couldn't love a thief or a murderer." "Don't be silly, child." Camille dismissed him. "He was a man of noble blood, a lawyer by education, from a fine family, father a professor, mother brought up children. She fulfilled the true purpose of a woman, mind you." "Oh my!" Lucy was surprised. "So what happened?" "Human meanness. My lover had a friend whom everyone knew and loved. Sebastian trusted him without measure. They worked in the same department, positions of almost equal importance. It was necessary for this friend, somewhere in the corridors of power, to hear that Sebastian is prophesied in the chief's promotion, so he is prepared. He was a noble man, his honesty was noble. Why not take it up a notch? But suddenly he was angry. Why Sebastian, not him, was being promoted? So he wrote a denunciation. Was a mere denunciation believed and imprisoned? Lucy was horrified. The time, Lucy, was such that for any sneeze in the direction of the revered portrait could be imprisoned or shot, and no one would even know about the shooting. How did you find out about it? This friend was never promoted anyway. In time, he bitterly regretted what he'd done. He didn't think that Sebastian would die here, and soon that man's wife was also taken on the workers' complaint. She was a doctor and of undesirable nationality, and his friend loved his wife. Childless, he was going crazy with loneliness, and his conscience must have tormented him too. He left the confession, entrusted it to a trustworthy person, and then he took his own life. He knew his wife would never come back. What kind of man is he? Lucy was outraged. He took the life and happiness of so many people, and himself too. My husband is the same, and I'm sure he won't be happy either. What did he do? Is he the reason you're here? Camille asked. Because of him. Lucy sighed. If he had been a faithful man, honest, he would not have left me and my son without money. How did you decide to go to such a terrible place? You're an educated girl. You could work a little. You'd have enough for bread and potatoes. Lucy told the old woman her story without hiding or embellishing anything. At the end of the story, tears spurted from her eyes. Poor girl, said Camille, holding Lucy's head against her chest. You are a hero. Yes, for the sake of a beloved creature one would do anything. If only I could bring Sebastian back. But life is short. It's been many years since he died, and here I am, needy and lonely. Be strong, Lucy. Since then, Camille had been discreetly patronizing Lucy. So, kind, though seemingly stern, she was always making sure Lucy dried her clothes, tucking in better pieces of food in the dining room. She knew Lucy wasn't just making money, she was saving her son. Soon, a new cook arrived for their job, and Camille said a warm goodbye to everyone and departed for the town where she had a tiny room. A month later, an old woman suddenly came to Lucy's brigade again, waited until lunchtime, called her over to her, and, unnoticed by the others, showed her the corner of a puffy envelope. Here's the money, she said in a low voice. Lucy wanted to say something, but the old woman signally ordered her to be silent, quiet, and they killed for less. There are all sorts of people here, God forbid, and don't even think of refusing. I have no relatives. I'm going to die soon. They'll scatter like crows anyway, and you'll have a job to do. Go away, save your son and yourself. No one has ever taken good health away from here. How old do you think I am? 100 years old? I just turned 70. There was enough money to do 3 Mason surgeries. Lucy took the money and left. My son had the surgery, and he started walking. Restoring mobility was a long and difficult task, and it required a lot of money. It was only Camille's gift that made this miracle possible. Mason worked with the best physiotherapists, practiced physical therapy, and constantly strengthened his legs. And a year later, Lucy returned to the distant Tega town and took Camille to herself. The old woman cried, almost kissed her hands, saying that she had acquired a family. She had grown old, but she kept her activity and lively mind. so the three of them lived together. Camille worked hard in the vegetable garden, helped Lucy a lot around the house. It seemed there was no skill she didn't possess. Babs, Camille, where did you learn to do that? Mason wondered, munching crisply on her baked waddles. At Granny Clara's, and they're not so tasty. But don't tell her that, she'll be offended. Camille and Mason looked at each other conspiratorially and giggled. Both old women had a temper, but their age, their shared memories of the past, kept them close friends. They often posed on the bench, one big as a bear, the other small, dry gray knot on the top of her head. Nothing of Lucy's past life in the village, of course, was recognized. The old women were silent as partisans. Lucy made a pie in the morning. While she was making the paste, preparing the filling, the sun rose quite high. "I'll be ready in time for lunch," said Lucy, and began to heat the oven. At that time, a dog barked in the yard. Lucy came out and was stunned to see Daniel standing on the other side of the gate. He was smiling at his ex-wife as if nothing had happened. Following her mother and Mason went outside to see who it was. The dog didn't usually bark at his own, so it must be someone else. Lucy walked to the wicket gate, throwing to her son on the way. "Mason, get away from the sin." The son walked slowly toward the house. Lucy did not look in his direction. Her heart was tearing out of her chest. The hated man stood on the other side of the fence and smirked. He hadn't changed much even in those 10 years, only became, as if shallower, uncasey, and maybe now the ex-wife saw him with different eyes. "Why did you come?" Coldly, Lucy asked him. "Go where you came from. There's nothing of yours here." "I didn't come here to demand anything." The smile slowly fell off Daniel's face. "I came back to check on you. We're not strangers. What are you doing here?" "Your money's gone." "I took it all. I didn't even leave any money for my son's medicine." Daniel, of course, didn't expect a warm welcome, but it was the first time he'd seen Lucy so angry. He's her lawful husband. She could still behave more decently. He decided to take offense. "Why did you do that?" "But it turned out so. But I came back, and you're not happy." "Daniel, are you serious? After all these years, after what you did, you think you can just come back? I know you're single, so you were waiting. For you? Waiting?" Lucy even choked with indignation. How insolent is he? It disgusted her to look at his fat face. "What did I do?" "What? I ask you. You live happily, everything is fine, and then this is my house too. You a shoal." The woman barely restrained her anger not to attack her ex-husband with fists. "Go away." "What shared house? You stole the money that was prepared for the child's operation. You left us in a position we wouldn't wish on an enemy. You haven't paid a dime of child support. How can you even say that?" Suddenly, Lucy saw Mason standing next to her. He had a shotgun in his hand. The guy threw it down and aimed it at Daniel and said, "Go away, and don't ever come near our house." Daniel turned pale, but then pulled himself together, remained standing where he was. Then he swallowed and said through the force of it, "What are you threatening me?" "Not a fool to shoot, who will spoil his life young. Go away when adults are talking." Lucy, terrified, rushed between father and son, but Mason stepped around her and took aim again. Daniel, not noticing Mason's movements, stepped from foot to foot. He was pleased with himself. It wasn't the kind of reception he'd been expecting, of course, but he wouldn't just walk away. Not noticing the hatred of his wife and son looking at him from the other side of the fence, he said cheekily, "At least pay compensation for my half." Oh, he could use even a little money now. Miranda threw him out, as they say, without severance pay. Where's he going to go now? All he could do was to get his way, to squeeze some money out of these poor people. Daniel looked up and saw Lucy trying to take the gun away from Mason. To tell the truth, he was afraid that a stray bullet would fly out, and then all his dreams would be over. But then an old lady appeared next to Mason and Lucy, as if from under the ground. She gently took the gun from Mason's hands. "Don't do it, grandson. He's right. Why would you ruin your life? For something like this. You got everything to look forward to, but I got nothing to lose." And Camille very professionally dropped the double-barreled shotgun. Daniel, despite his fear, even laughed. What a scene! Her graying head barely sticking out of the ground, but she grabbed the gun with her bony hands instantly and pointed it at him. What a laugh! Daniel heard the old woman's creaky voice. "Do you know your name?" "Daniel, right?" "Well, I was the best hunter in my time. No man could compare to me, and I wouldn't miss a boar like that." The first shot went in the air. Daniel jumped with surprise. His desperate fear came back to him. With a mocking smile, looking at him, Baba Camille said, "The second shot is usually at the knee." And she began to slowly lower the gun down. Daniel was gripped by panic. Such an iron button could put a bullet in his knee. He didn't remember how he shrieked all over the street. "I'm going to jail. I'll put you all in jail." He turned and ran, away from the Dan house. Then he stopped for a moment, turned around, shook his fist. Anything he might have expected, but not such a reception. But people, and you came to them with all your soul. As to your relatives, in fact, they are his closest people, and they... A shot rang out again, and a small fountain of pebbles and sand appeared under the man's feet. Daniel shrieked and ran. Turning down another street, he stopped to catch his breath. What to do now? Nothing good had come of his attempt. He would not be able to use his wife's services as he had done 10 years ago, and live happily in a free apartment. As he now called it on Miranda, his former home, his home too. The thought hit Daniel's brain like a red rag on an angry bull. "I will," he repeated, again strengthening himself in his hatred for his ex, his wife and son. Knowing his goal, he walked confidently toward the police station, which was located where he had been in previous years. Before opening the doors of the police station, Daniel shook himself off, breathed and gathered his strength, and then he shook himself back to his former indignant state and stepped inside with determination. "Hello, who can I complain to here? I was just almost shot outside my own house." And the freckled boy in a police uniform, sitting behind the window of the duty officer, looked at him indifferently and lazily said, "Come on, there have never been any murders in our village. But come with me now, I'll show you who shoots at the feet of peaceful people and threatens to shoot them to death. Who attempted to kill you, citizen? The old woman's crazy. She belongs in a mental institution. She might shoot someone else. So what? Does she have the rifle?" The officer on duty asked with a sneer. "A hunting rifle. And rest assured, she handles it like a pro." Daniel, at the memory of the accurate shots, was again seized by an unpleasant feeling of threat to his life. "Show me your papers as a citizen." Daniel took out a passport from his inside jacket pocket. "Ah, so you're Mason's absconding father?" the policeman asked. "I see a familiar face. I remembered you. You worked as an electrician when I was still in school." He didn't look happy to be recognized. Daniel was forced to write a statement, and at the duty officer's request, he rewrote it 5 times. There was even a suspicion whether it was done on purpose. But the freckles of the young officer on duty looked completely serious. So Daniel resigned himself to rewriting it. We will take all measures, citizen of the victim. The policeman reported for some reason without calling Daniel by his surname. Did he dislike the surname or what? Daniel sighed and quietly went back to Abigail. Maybe his sister wouldn't say no to another sleepover while the police dealt with the assassination case. Daniel wasn't going to let it go. At least let them compensate him for the moral damage. They must have plenty of money. Lucy had built a house in his yard, by the way. Tomorrow morning he'll go back to the police station. He'll get what he wants. He should have threatened to go further, to the prosecutor, if anything. The police couldn't find any weapons, and they weren't looking for any. All the neighbors confirmed that they were outside at the time, and they didn't see anything like what Daniel wrote in his statement. He never showed up in Lucy and Mason's lives again.